Hey friends! Glad you're here at Fanfic Universe. We've cooked up something special. What if Naruto's Werewolf Bloodline was sealed by the Council and Goblins found 100 blocks on his power? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, The Audit. The mission had been stupid from the start. Not dangerous stupid, not the kind of stupid that got people killed, just the grinding, bureaucratic, makes you want to pull your hair out stupid that Naruto had come to associate with anything involving paperwork, official seals, and the particular shade of beige that Konoha's administrative offices seemed to favor for every single wall surface, as if the architect had personally hated joy. It had started 3 days ago with a B-rank escort mission to a merchant town called Tsukino, 2 days' walk southeast of Konoha. Simple enough. Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke under Kakashi's supervision, which meant Kakashi had spent most of the walk reading his little orange book while the 3 genin bickered about formation spacing and whether it counted as cheating if Sasuke used his Sharingan to win at cards. The merchant, a round-faced man named Benzo who sweated constantly despite the mild weather, had been nervous the whole way there, clutching a lacquered box to his chest like it contained his heart. It had contained Rice Futures contracts. 47 pages of Rice Futures contracts. Naruto had protected 47 pages of Rice Futures contracts with his life for 2 days, which felt like a cosmic joke aimed specifically at him. They'd delivered Benzo safely. He'd bowed 17 times, pressed a payment scroll into Kakashi's hand, and waddled away into his trading house without a backward glance. The team had stopped at the nearest inn. Kakashi had disappeared to hand in the payment scroll at the local mission processing office, and Naruto had ordered the largest bowl of ramen the kitchen could physically produce. He was halfway through it when Kakashi came back with a look on his face that meant something was wrong with the money. The payment scroll, Kakashi said carefully, sitting down across from Naruto and setting the scroll on the table between them like it was mildly explosive, appears to have been registered through a Kogarashi vault account. Naruto looked up from his ramen. What account? Kogarashi. Sakura leaned over from her seat, reading the scroll's header. The underground banking clan. They handle long-term asset storage, financial contracts, and chakra-bound agreements. Mostly for old merchant families and minor noble houses. She paused. They also do audits. Audits, Naruto repeated. Routine assessments. Of assets. Sakura glanced at Kakashi. Why is this a problem? It's not, precisely, Kakashi said. But Kogarashi payment scrolls have to be verified in person at their local branch office before they can be converted to Rio. The nearest branch is here in Tsukino. He tilted his head. Also, the scroll appears to be flagged. Naruto put down his chopsticks. Flagged how? Kakashi's visible eye curved slightly in a way that Naruto had learned to read as I would rather be reading my book right now. Apparently, Benzo-san has been a Kogarashi account holder for 30 years. He's also been filing chakra asset declarations for the last 30 years. And in those 30 years, he has listed the Konoha ninja escort service as a recurring contract expense. Kakashi set the scroll flat. The Kogarashi cross-reference every declared expense against their clients' known associates. Which means when they see a new Konoha ninja assigned to his account, they flag that ninja for a standard identification audit. A long silence. They want to audit me? Naruto said. All 3 of you, technically. But Sakura and Sasuke's accounts were cleared through standard Konoha records in about 40 seconds. Kakashi's I did the curve thing again. Yours took longer. Why would mine take longer? They didn't say. Sasuke, who had been sitting at the end of the table eating his meal with the focused silence he applied to everything, set down his chopsticks. Then we go find out. The Kogarashi branch office in Tsukino was not what Naruto had expected. He'd expected something like the Konoha mission office, gray walls, harried clerks, a line out the door, the ambient smell of stress and old ink. What he got instead was a building that seemed to have been built downward rather than up, with only a modest stone facade visible from the street, a single dark wood door, and a brass plaque that read, Kogarashi Financial Services, established before your village, which Naruto found either impressive or rude depending on how you looked at it. Kakashi pushed the door open and led them inside, down a short stone staircase that opened into a surprisingly large underground chamber lit by pale blue lanterns that cast light without warmth. The ceiling was vaulted, carved directly from bedrock, and the whole space had the particular quiet of somewhere that had been serious for a very long time. Behind a wide stone counter stood 3 Kogarashi clerks, small, lean figures with sharp angular features, large amber eyes, and the kind of stillness that came from working in the same place for 100 years. They wore dark gray uniforms with small brass buttons and looked at the 4 shinobi with the mild, assessing interest of people who had seen considerably stranger things before breakfast. The one in the center, slightly taller than the other 2, with a name placard that read GRIV, looked directly at Naruto. "Uzumaki Naruto," Griff said. "Not a question." His voice was precise, slightly dry, the kind of voice that was accustomed to saying numbers aloud. "We've been expecting you." Naruto stopped walking. "You know my name." "We know a great many things." Griff stepped around the counter with a small ledger tucked under one arm, and Naruto got a better look at him, maybe 4.5 feet tall, slim-fingered, with close-cropped dark hair and eyes that were currently doing something Naruto couldn't quite name. Not hostility. Not warmth. Something more like focus. The way a craftsman looked at a piece of work they hadn't made but needed to understand. "Please follow me. This will require a private assessment room." Kakashi moved slightly forward. "His sensei may wait here." Griv's tone was courteous, absolute, and completely final. Kogarashi identification audits are conducted between the auditor and the subject only. It is not personal, Hataki-san. It is contractual. Kakashi looked at Naruto. Naruto shrugged. "I've been through worse than a financial audit." "You haven't," Griv said mildly, and led him through a side door. The assessment room was small and spare, 2 stone chairs, a low table, a single blue lantern mounted in the wall. Griv set his ledger on the table and opened it to a page that appeared to be completely blank, then uncapped a small inkwell and dipped a stylus in it without looking up. "Sit," he said. Naruto sat. Full name: Uzumaki Naruto. Date of birth: October 10th. Chakra nature: Wind primary. A bit of everything, honestly. Griv paused at that. He wrote something in the ledger that Naruto couldn't read from his angle. Rank: genin. Another pause. Griv looked up from his ledger for the first time since they'd sat down. His amber eyes settled on Naruto with that same craftsman's focus, steady and unreadable. "You said chakra nature, wind primary and a bit of everything." "Yeah. I mean, I've used fire and water and earth in training. I can feel them when I push. I'm not asking about training adaptations." Griv set the stylus down. "I'm asking about your native chakra signature. The one you were born with. The one your body produces when you stop trying and simply are." He folded his hands on the table. "Describe it." Naruto opened his mouth, closed it, and sat back. It was a strange question. Nobody had ever asked him that before, not Kakashi, not Irika, not any of the academy instructors. They'd tested him for fire, water, earth, wind, lightning with the standard chakra paper and called it done. His paper had split cleanly for wind and they'd moved on. But when Naruto stopped thinking about it and just felt, the way he sometimes did late at night when the apartment was quiet and the city was asleep and there was nothing to perform for and nobody to impress, there was something under the wind. Something older. Something that moved like tides rather than gusts, that rose and fell with a rhythm that wasn't quite his heartbeat. Sometimes at night he could feel it pressing against the inside of his ribs like a second pulse, low and steady and a little wild. He'd always assumed it was the Ninetales. He'd never examined it closely enough to wonder if it wasn't. "There's something underneath," he said finally. "Under the wind. Something, I don't know." Like a tide. Griv was very still. Like it comes and goes, Naruto continued, not sure why he was still talking but unable to stop. On its own schedule. Not mine. I always thought it was the fox, but it doesn't feel like the fox. The fox is loud. This is quiet. Griv reached into his jacket and removed a small device that Naruto had never seen before, a flat disc of dark stone about the size of his palm, with 7 concentric rings carved into its surface, each inlaid with a different metal. He set it on the table between them. Place your palm flat on this. Naruto looked at it. What does it do? It reads. Griv's voice was still dry, still precise, but there was something underneath it now, a tightness, almost. Like a man carefully keeping his face neutral. Everything you have, everything you are, everything that has been done to your chakra system. It is a complete audit. It cannot lie and it cannot be tricked. He met Naruto's eyes. Place your palm on it, please. Naruto put his hand on the stone disc. It was cold at first, then warm, then it began to hum, low and resonant, vibrating against his palm in a frequency that made his back teeth ache. The 7 rings lit up sequentially from the outside in, each one a different color, white, then silver, then gold, then a deep amber, then red, then blue, then the innermost ring, which should have been the last, which lit up in a color that Naruto didn't have a name for. Something between silver and violet. Something that felt like moonlight would feel if moonlight had a temperature. Then every ring pulsed once and went dark. Griv stared at the disc for a long moment. Then he picked up his stylus, opened his ledger to a fresh page, and began to write. He wrote for a long time. Naruto watched the stylus move across the page in tight, precise lines, watched Griv's expression stay neutral through what seemed like a significant effort of will, and felt the first thread of genuine unease curl up through his stomach. Is something wrong? Naruto asked. Griv finished writing. He set the stylus down. He looked at Naruto across the table with those steady amber eyes, and for the first time since they'd sat down, his expression wasn't neutral. It was something Naruto recognized from Iruka's face on the day Naruto had graduated, a kind of complicated sorrow that adults got when they knew something terrible and had to decide how to say it. Young man, Griv said quietly, someone has stolen from you. Extensively. The words landed in the silence of the small stone room like stones dropped into still water. What? Your chakra system has been subjected to a sealing array. Griv turned the ledger around so Naruto could see the page. It was covered in neat columns of numbers, notations in a script Naruto couldn't read, and at the bottom, a single large numeral that Griv had circled twice. Not the 8 trigram seal placed by your father. That seal is intact and functioning as designed. I am referring to a secondary array, placed over your father's seal and throughout your primary chakra pathways. Specifically engineered to suppress. He tapped the circled number. 100 individual suppression blocks, Uzumaki-san. Each one precisely placed. Each one active. Each one working in concert with the others to limit your chakra output, dull your sensory processing, slow your healing factor, and, he paused, and his voice dropped to something that was almost careful, suppress your bloodline. Naruto stared at the number. 100. What bloodline? His voice came out quieter than he intended. Griv was quiet for a moment. Then he said, are you aware of the moonborn clan of Uzushiogakure? I'm aware of Uzushiogakure. My mom was from there. Naruto's jaw was tight. The village got destroyed. Before it was destroyed, it was home to the Moonborn, a bloodline clan whose members could channel lunar chakra. Not metaphorically. Literal alignment with the moon's gravitational pull on chakra pathways, producing a secondary transformation and a completely separate set of abilities from standard ninjutsu. Griv's voice was still precise, still dry, but there was a weight underneath it. Your mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was the last known living carrier of that bloodline. She passed it to you. A beat. Someone knew this. Someone placed 100 seals on your system specifically to ensure that bloodline never activated. The blue lantern in the wall hummed softly. Somewhere above them, muffled by stone, Naruto could hear the faint sounds of Tsukino going about its day, cartwheels on cobblestone, a vendor calling out prices, a child laughing. The normal sounds of a world that had no idea what was happening in this small room. Naruto's hands were flat on his thighs. He could feel the roughness of his orange jacket fabric under his fingertips. He focused on that because if he didn't focus on something physical he thought he might float right out of his body. 100 seals, he said. Yes. Since when? The oldest layers date to approximately 6 months after your birth. Griv's voice was steady, careful. They were applied in stages. The first seals went on when you were an infant. Additional blocks were added at intervals, twice more before you entered the academy, and once after your graduation. The most recent block was placed approximately 1 year ago. Naruto closed his eyes. 1 year ago. He'd been 12. Somebody had looked at a 12-year-old boy and decided to reach into his chakra system and put another lock on him. While he was sleeping, or eating, or doing something completely ordinary, somebody had come close enough to touch him and added one more stone to the pile. Who? He said. Not a question. A sound. I cannot say with certainty who placed the seals without further analysis. What I can tell you is that the sealing style matches Konoha's own Fuinjutsu techniques, specifically the advanced application methods that would have been available to the village's senior administrative and security personnel. Griv paused. Whoever did this had access to master-level sealing knowledge, a detailed understanding of the 8 trigram seal, and the means to access you repeatedly over 12 years without being detected by your guardian or your Jonin sensei. Naruto opened his eyes. The number in the ledger looked back at him. 100. Circled. Twice. Can they be removed? He asked. Yes. Griv folded his hands. Carefully, methodically, and in stages, removing them all at once would be like removing a dam while standing in the riverbed. Your system would flood itself. The power returning too quickly would cause catastrophic damage. He held Naruto's gaze. But yes. They can be removed. All of them. And what returns, he paused, something shifting behind his amber eyes, will be considerable. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. You're supposed to be a financial auditor, he said finally. I am a financial auditor, Griv said. But Kogarashi audits cover all assets. Chakra is an asset. Bloodlines are an asset. His voice didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a straightening, a squaring of the shoulders. What has been done to you violates the Kogarashi Asset Integrity Code, which predates every hidden village treaty currently in force. You have been systematically robbed of your inheritance, your birthright, and 12 years of your own capability. He met Naruto's eyes with an expression that was no longer professional. It was something colder, and older, and considerably more serious. We do not ignore that. Not for anyone. Naruto looked down at the disc on the table. The 7 rings sat dark and silent now, having said everything they had to say. Okay, he said. Griv blinked. Whatever he'd expected, apparently it wasn't okay. Okay, Naruto said again, sitting up straighter. So what do we do first? When Naruto came back into the main chamber, Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke were waiting in 3 different positions that told him exactly how they'd spent the last hour, Kakashi leaning against the far wall pretending to read, Sakura sitting upright on a bench with her hands folded and her eyes sharp, Sasuke standing with his arms crossed and his back to everyone, studying a crack in the stone wall with the intensity he usually reserved for training. All 3 of them looked at Naruto when he walked in. He knew what his face looked like. He'd felt it settle into place in the assessment room, not blank, not breaking, but held tight, the way you held something you weren't ready to put down yet because you hadn't figured out where to set it. Kakashi straightened away from the wall slowly. His visible eye tracked Naruto's face and the ledger Griv had given him to keep, and his body language went through a subtle shift that Naruto had learned to read as something is wrong and I don't have enough information yet. How'd it go? Sakura asked, her voice carefully calibrated to casual. Fine, Naruto said, which was a lie so obvious it didn't count as lying. He looked at Kakashi. We need to talk. All of us. Not here. Griv had followed him out and now stood at the counter's edge, small and composed, his ledger closed under one arm. Uzumaki-san, he said quietly. Naruto stopped. The documentation I gave you is a Kogarashi asset report. It carries legal weight under the intervillage financial accords that all 5 great nations have signed. No one can dismiss it. No one can alter it. He held Naruto's gaze. More importantly, I will personally follow up on this matter. You are not alone in what you now know. Sasuke turned from the wall. His dark eyes moved from Griv to Naruto to the ledger in Naruto's hand, and something shifted behind them, not softness, because Sasuke didn't do softness, but a kind of sharpening. Like something he'd half suspected just got confirmed. What's in the ledger? He asked. Later, Naruto said. Naruto, later. Not harsh. Just certain. The kind of certain that Naruto almost never used, which was maybe why Sasuke went quiet immediately instead of pushing back. They left the Kogarashi branch office and stepped back out into the Tsukino afternoon, into the cartwheels and vendor calls and laughing children. The sun was warm. The sky was ordinary. Someone nearby was frying fish and the smell of it drifted over the street in a way that should have been pleasant. Naruto stood on the cobblestones with a ledger full of stolen years in his hands and breathed through his nose and didn't say anything for a moment. 12 years. He'd been throttled for 12 years. Every wall he'd hit, every ceiling he'd scraped his knuckles against, every time he'd pushed himself to absolute exhaustion just to keep pace with Sasuke or Neji or any of the others and come home feeling like there was something wrong with him, something fundamentally insufficient, that hadn't been his failure. That hadn't been his limit. That had been a door someone else had locked. The anger was there. He could feel it, low, steady, very quiet, the way the most serious kind of anger was quiet, not hot and explosive like it usually was with him. This was different. This sat in his chest like a coal and didn't flicker. But underneath the anger was something else. Something that surprised him. Relief. Because he'd spent 12 years wondering why it was so hard. Why he had to try so much harder than everyone else just to keep up. Why something he couldn't identify always felt wrong, like a note played slightly flat, like a room missing a window. He'd made a story about it, that was just who he was, you had to work harder, you had to want it more, nothing comes easy for Naruto Uzumaki and that was fine, it hadn't been fine. It had been a lie someone else had told in his bones, and he'd spent 12 years believing it. He wouldn't anymore. Kakashi's hand settled on his shoulder, brief, light, the way Kakashi did things when he was being careful with something. Naruto looked up at him. Kakashi's visible eye was calm, but his jaw was set. Kakashi said quietly. All of us. Now. They took the room Kakashi had already rented, large enough for 4, sparse and clean, a window overlooking a side street where nothing much happened. Kakashi closed the door and stood in front of it with his arms crossed, which was the most closed-off body language Naruto had ever seen from him, and Naruto had seen Kakashi face down A-rank missing mean with less tension in his shoulders. Naruto set the ledger on the low table and sat cross-legged in front of it. Sakura sat across from him. Sasuke stood by the window, not pretending to look out of it. Talk, Kakashi said. Naruto talked. He told it flat and straight, the way Griv had told him, no performance, no build-up, just the facts in order because the facts were enough on their own. The secondary seal array. The 100 suppression blocks. The intervals, infant, toddler, before academy, after graduation, a year ago. The moonborn bloodline. His mother. What should have been returning to him all this time? He told it to the window and the wall and his own hands, and when he was finished, the room was very quiet. Sakura's face had gone through several things while he was talking: shock, then a narrowing focus that he recognized as her processing mode, then something that was almost fury but wasn't quite there yet, working itself up. Her hands were flat on her knees and her knuckles were white. Sasuke hadn't moved from the window. He was looking at Naruto now, not the street. His expression was the one Naruto could never fully read, not cold exactly, not warm, something in the borderlands of those two things where Sasuke mostly lived. Kakashi was the one who concerned Naruto most. Because Kakashi had gone very still in front of the door, and the set of his jaw had changed, and Naruto knew, without being able to say exactly how he knew, that Kakashi was doing math. Counting things. Coming up with a sum he didn't like. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said carefully. The most recent block was placed 1 year ago, Kakashi said. His voice was flat. You were 12. You were in my team. He stopped. Someone placed a suppression seal on one of my students while they were under my supervision, and I didn't notice. You couldn't have known, that's not the point. Kakashi's eye was focused somewhere in the middle distance, somewhere past the wall. Someone with access to Konoha's top-level sealing knowledge, with administrative authority, with the ability to access you repeatedly, placed a seal on you a year ago. His jaw tightened. That's not a stranger. That's not an enemy. That's someone inside the village with authority and proximity. The coal in Naruto's chest glowed a little brighter. The council, Sakura said quietly. Not a guess. She'd done the same math faster and said the answer out loud first. Kakashi looked at her. He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. Danzo, Sasuke said from the window. One word, like dropping a stone into a well. We don't know, Kakashi started. It's the Konoha sealing style. It's someone with access to an infant Hokage-level secret. It's someone who's been updating the seal for 12 years and added a new one a year ago. Sasuke turned from the window. Who has that access, that knowledge, and that kind of motivation? It's Danzo, or Hamura, or Koharu, or all three. Pick one. The silence that followed had a different quality than the one before it, less shock, more pressure. Naruto looked at the ledger on the table. He picked it up and held it, feeling the weight of it. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, the stone-infused cover dense and cool against his palms. Griv said this document has legal weight under the inter-village financial accords, he said. That no one can dismiss it and no one can alter it. He looked up at Kakashi. Is that true? Kakashi looked at the ledger. The flat calculation in his eye shifted into something more like a plan. The Kogarashi Accords predate Konoha's founding by 3 centuries. They're not just financial law, they're considered primary law in almost every nation because the Kogarashi have assets in all of them. He was quiet for a moment. If their auditor has formally documented what was done to you, then yes. That document is legally untouchable. Something shifted in his expression again. And the council knows it. Good, Naruto said. Something in his voice made all 3 of them look at him. He didn't look angry, exactly, or rather, the anger was there but it wasn't running the show. He looked like what he was, a boy who'd just been given 12 years back on paper and was now holding the paper steady in both hands, figuring out how to carry it forward. We go back to Konoha tomorrow, he said. Griv is meeting us there. He said the branch office will open a formal case file and assign an auditor representative to Konoha directly. When that's done, when the documentation is all in place, he paused, we start taking the seals off. Carefully, Kakashi said immediately, which was the only word that mattered. Carefully, Naruto agreed. 10 at a time. Griv said it'll take multiple sessions. He'll supervise each one. He set the ledger down. But we start. As soon as we're back. Sakura was looking at him with something complicated in her eyes, not pity, she knew him better than that, but something she was working through. Naruto. Your bloodline. The moonborn thing. That's mine, Naruto said simply. Not defensive. Just certain. She nodded slowly. Yeah, she said. It is. Outside, the Tsukino afternoon was starting its quiet slide toward evening, the light going amber and long through the window. Somewhere down the street the fish frying smell had given way to something sweeter, someone baking, or burning incense, or maybe both. Naruto looked at the ledger one more time. 100 suppression blocks. 12 years. His mother's bloodline sitting dormant in his veins, waiting. He thought about the thing he described to Griv, the tide beneath the wind, the low steady pulse that wasn't quite his heartbeat, the sensation of pressing against the inside of his ribs on quiet nights like something wanting out. It had been waiting. It didn't have to wait much longer. That night, for the first time in as long as he could remember, Naruto lay awake not from loneliness or restlessness or the particular specific ache of being 12 years old and alone in a city that didn't much want you, but from something else entirely. Something that felt, if he was honest with himself, like anticipation. The inn was quiet. Through the thin wall he could hear Sakura's steady breathing, Sasuke's complete and disciplined silence, and from Kakashi's corner a faint sound that might have been a page turning and might have been something else. The window threw a rectangle of moonlight across the floor, sharp-edged and silver. Naruto lay on his back and looked at the moonlight. He pressed one hand flat against his chest, over his heart, and breathed slowly, and reached down with his attention the way Griv had suggested, not toward the fox, not toward the seal, but under them, to the deep low hum that had always been there, that he'd always misidentified and dismissed. It was still there. But now that he knew what it was, it felt different. Or maybe it felt the same and he was the one who was different, listening for the first time with the right kind of attention. The tide moved in and out, slow and enormous and patient, with the unhurried certainty of something that had been waiting for 12 years and was perfectly capable of waiting 12 more if it had to. But it wouldn't have to. Naruto felt the corner of his mouth pull up in the dark, just slightly, not the loud grin he showed everyone, not the performance of it, but the real one underneath. Small and private and absolutely certain. I know you're there, he thought at the tide in his blood, at the moonlight on the floor, at 12 years of stolen time lying in a stone-covered ledger on the table. I'm coming. Chapter 2, 100 stones. They were back in Konoha by noon the next day. Kakashi had pushed the pace, not enough to be obvious about it, not enough to make Naruto feel like he was being handled, but enough that they arrived at the village gates 2 hours ahead of schedule with dust on their boots and very little conversation between them. Sakura had spent most of the walk reviewing the copy of the ledger Griv had made for her, her brow furrowed in the way it got when she was pulling something apart to understand it. Sasuke had walked in silence, which was normal, except that his silence had a different quality to it today, less closed off, more like someone sitting with a thought they hadn't finished yet. Naruto had walked at the front of the group, which wasn't his usual position, and nobody had commented on it. The Konoha gates opened the same way they always did, the two Chunin on duty waving them through with the mild, distracted efficiency of people who'd processed 100 returning teams that week. Naruto walked through and felt the familiar weight of the village settle around him, the smell of it, the noise of it, the particular density of being somewhere that was both home and the place where someone had spent 12 years reaching into him while he slept. He kept walking. The mission desk was their first stop, standard post-mission protocol, debrief, payment processing. Naruto stood at the back of their small group while Kakashi handled the paperwork and let himself look at the administrative building with new eyes. Beige walls. Filing systems. People moving through the space with the comfortable authority of those who had always belonged in it. Someone in a building like this had helped draft the seals. Someone had requisitioned the sealing materials. Someone had scheduled the access. Bureaucracy left traces even when it tried not to. He filed that thought away. Griv was already there when they reached the inn near the market district where he'd said he would meet them, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea he wasn't drinking, his ledger open, 3 other documents spread in an organized arc around him. He looked up when Naruto pushed through the door and gave a small, precise nod. "You made good time," Griv said. "We walked fast," Naruto said, dropping into the seat across from him. Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke arranged themselves around the table with the efficiency of people who'd been operating as a unit long enough that spatial coordination was automatic. Kakashi ordered tea for the group. Griv waited until the server had gone before he turned the top document to face Naruto. "The formal case file has been opened," Griv said. Reference number 7741, UZ, under the Kogarashi Asset Integrity Statute, Clause 9, Unauthorized Suppression of Registered Bloodline Abilities and Primary Chakra Pathways. He tapped the document. "This has been filed with the Kogarashi Central Archive, which means it now exists in 17 copies in 7 different locations, none of which are accessible to Konoha's administration. It cannot be sealed, suppressed, confiscated, or conveniently lost." He looked at Naruto over the document. "It is permanent." "Good," Naruto said. "I've also sent formal notification to Konoha's administrative office, specifically to the Hokage's desk, not the council chamber. The Sandaime will receive it within the hour." Griv paused. "That will cause some movement." "You think the council will react quickly?" Kakashi said. "I think people who have maintained a secret for 12 years and suddenly learn that a legally untouchable document naming the existence of that secret has arrived on the Hokage's desk will react very quickly, yes." Griv sipped his tea finally, set it down. "Which is why the unsealing needs to begin today." The table went slightly quiet. "Today," Sakura repeated. "The longer we wait, the more opportunity the responsible parties have to complicate matters. Legal documents are powerful, but power abhors a vacuum." Griv's amber eyes settled on Naruto. "More practically, the document alone does not restore what was taken. We need to begin the process before anyone attempts to interfere with it." He folded his hands. "I have identified a suitable location. The chakra work will take most of the afternoon. I'll need the 3 of you," he glanced at Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke, "to stand witness. Kogarashi unsealing protocol requires registered witnesses." "What exactly happens during the unsealing?" Sakura asked. She had her copy of the ledger open and her stylus in hand, which Naruto recognized as her "I am going to understand this completely" posture. "The suppression blocks are layered, think of them as stones stacked in a well, each one resting on the one beneath it. We remove them from the top down, 10 at a time, with intervals between each set to allow the chakra system to stabilize at the new pressure level." Griv's voice took on the particular quality of someone explaining something they've thought about carefully. "Each removal will feel different. The first 10 will be subtle, a slight increase in chakra volume, improved sensory range, faster reflexes. The deeper we go, the more significant each stage becomes." He looked at Naruto. "By the time we reach the final layers, the ones placed closest to the bloodline seal, what you experience will not be subtle." "How not subtle?" Naruto asked. "The deepest seals are the ones suppressing the moonborn bloodline directly. When those come off," Griv paused, choosing his words with visible care, "you will feel it. In a fundamental way. Your chakra will reconfigure around the bloodline's natural pathways. Your sensory abilities will expand significantly. And you will become very aware of the moon." Sasuke's eyebrow went up slightly. "We're not removing the deepest seals today," Griv added. "Today is the first stage, the top 10. That alone will represent a significant change." He looked around the table. "Questions?" "Just one," Naruto said. "Where are we doing this?" The location Griv had chosen was a small clearing in the training grounds east of the village, far enough from the main areas to be private, close enough to Konoha that they could get help quickly if something went wrong, which Griv assured them would not happen in a tone that Naruto found moderately reassuring. The clearing was dappled and quiet in the afternoon light, ringed by old trees that had been growing there since before Naruto was born. The grass was thick and uneven. A stream ran somewhere nearby, audible but not visible. Griv set up his materials with the methodical efficiency of someone who did this regularly. A circle of small stone markers placed at precise intervals, the disc device from the assessment room set at the center, additional tools Naruto didn't recognize arranged in a specific order on a cloth laid flat on the ground. Kakashi stood at the clearing's edge with his hands in his pockets, watching everything with the alert stillness he deployed when he was paying very serious attention while appearing merely relaxed. Sakura had her notebook out. Sasuke had found a tree to lean against. "Sit here," Griv told Naruto, pointing to the center of the stone circle, in front of the disc. Naruto sat. "The process is not painful," Griv said, crouching to make a final adjustment to one of the stone markers. "Some people describe pressure. Some describe warmth. The bloodline layers, when we get to them in later sessions, will be more intense. But today," he stood, satisfied with his arrangement, "today should be manageable." "Okay," Naruto said. "I need you to relax your chakra pathways as completely as you can. Don't push. Don't direct. Just let everything sit open." Griv picked up the disc and held it above Naruto's head at arm's length. "Close your eyes." Naruto closed his eyes. He could hear the stream. He could hear Sakura's stylus moving across her notebook page. He could feel the sun on his face through the tree canopy, warm and intermittent. He breathed out slowly and did what Griv had asked, unclenched everything, let his chakra pathways go passive, stop trying to feel any particular way. The disc hummed. It started at the top of his head, a warmth, exactly as Griv had described, spreading down through his skull and into the back of his neck. Not unpleasant. Like stepping into sunlight after a long time indoors. It moved through his shoulders and into his chest, following the paths his chakra ran, and everywhere it touched felt like something releasing. He hadn't known how tight everything was until it started loosening. Like fists he'd been holding clenched for so long they'd forgotten they were clenched, now slowly opening. Griv murmured something in a language Naruto didn't recognize, short, precise syllables, repeated 3 times. The warmth intensified briefly and then steadied. Naruto felt a series of small distinct clicks that weren't quite physical and weren't quite sound but registered somewhere between the two, 10 of them in quick succession, each one releasing a faint pressure he hadn't consciously noticed was there. Then Griv lowered the disc and said, "First stage complete." Naruto opened his eyes. The clearing looked the same. The trees were the same trees. The dappled afternoon light was the same. Griv was crouching in front of him with his professional expression and his amber eyes, and the stream was louder. That was the first thing. Not dramatically louder, but present in a way it hadn't been before, like a volume knob that had been turned up just enough to notice. And the smell of the clearing was richer somehow, the grass and the earth and the particular quality of air near running water, all of it more distinct and textured, like the difference between looking through glass and looking without it. And his chakra. Naruto raised one hand and pushed a small pulse of chakra into his palm, the way he'd done 10,000 times in basic training exercises. It came instantly. Not faster exactly, but bigger, filling the space he'd allowed for it more completely, like water poured into a cup that had previously had a false bottom. He stared at the faint shimmer of chakra on his palm. "Oh," he said. "Yes," Griv said. "That's..." Naruto turned his hand over, watching the chakra move. "That's just 10. "That is 10, Griv confirmed. "Out of 100. Kakashi had pushed off the tree and walked over without Naruto noticing him do it, which said something about the state Kakashi was in, because Kakashi did not move without Naruto noticing. He crouched beside Griv and looked at Naruto's hand with an expression that was doing several things simultaneously, relief, and something cracking behind it, and the particular look of a man being confronted with the evidence of something he should have seen sooner. "Naruto," Kakashi said. "I know," Naruto said. "Not unkindly." Kakashi was quiet for a moment. Then, "How does it feel?" Naruto thought about it. "Like breathing normally for the first time," he said. Except I didn't know I wasn't breathing normally until just now. Something in Kakashi's jaw tightened briefly and then released. He put a hand on Naruto's shoulder, the same brief, careful touch as last night, but this time it stayed a beat longer. Sasuke had moved away from his tree. He was standing at the edge of the stone circle, looking at the shimmer on Naruto's palm, and his expression had finally resolved into something readable, a kind of intense, quiet focus that Naruto recognized as the look Sasuke got when something had shifted under his feet and he was taking stock of the new ground. "Do the next 10, Sasuke said. Griv looked at him with mild surprise. "The stabilization interval," Griv began. "How long is the stabilization interval for stage 1? "Approximately 20 minutes for the chakra pathways to adjust to the new pressure." "It's been 12 minutes, Sasuke said, which meant he'd been counting from the moment Griv had said first stage complete. "Close enough." "It is not, in fact, close enough, Sasuke," Naruto said. Sasuke looked at him. "He'll do the next 10 when it's time." Naruto held his gaze. "Stop." A beat. Sasuke looked away first, which was notable enough that Sakura glanced up from her notebook and back down again without saying anything. They waited the full 20 minutes. Griv spent the time reviewing his documentation, making small notes, checking the positioning of the stone markers with the precision of someone who considered correctness its own reward. Naruto sat in the circle and felt the new space in his chakra pathways filling gradually, the system settling into its expanded capacity the way water found its own level. It was extraordinary and quiet, and he tried to experience it fully rather than rushing past it, because he was aware with a clarity that surprised him that this was something he would only experience once. The first 20-minute window of knowing the truth, sitting in the proof of it. 12 years. He let himself feel that. Not the anger could wait, the anger would still be there, but the simple fact of it. 12 years of being told by his own body's manufactured evidence that he was less than he was. 12 years of pushing twice as hard to reach half as far as he should have and finding stories to explain the gap. He thought about the academy. About graduation, barely, by the skin of technique theft and desperation. About the early team missions where Sasuke had been demonstrably faster and stronger and more refined, and Naruto had thought, "This is just who I am, you have to work harder, you have to want it more." He thought about Niji at the Chunin exams, looking at him with those pale eyes and explaining with perfect clinical calm that some people were born to fail. Niji, who had been wrong, but who had looked at Naruto's results and not been unreasonable to draw the conclusion he'd drawn from them. 100 stones, stacked on a boy, and the boy had been told the weight was his own. "Ready," Griv said. Naruto closed his eyes again. The second set of 10 landed differently. The warmth was sharper this time, the releasing clicks more distinct, and when the last one released, something in his chest opened up that he felt from his sternum to his fingertips, a sudden flood of space, like a room gaining an extra wall on all sides simultaneously. His chakra surged briefly before settling, and for about 3 seconds his eyes snapped open involuntarily, and the clearing was bright, every color sharper, every shadow more defined, the air itself seemingly textured with information. Then it normalized. "Sakura," he said. She looked up. "Come here." She crossed the circle and crouched in front of him, professional and careful, her hands hovering without touching. "What do you need?" "Nothing, he paused. "Spar with me. Just taijutsu, right here, nothing serious. I need to feel what this is." She blinked. "Right now?" Griv said the intervals are for the chakra pathways to stabilize. "I'm stabilized. I just want to." He stood up, and even standing felt different, like the floor was more present under his feet. "Feel it." Sakura looked at Griv. Griv considered. "Light contact only. Nothing that would spike the chakra pressure significantly." He paused. "And don't break the stone markers." Sakura stood, shifted her weight, and threw a testing jab at Naruto's shoulder. He slipped it. Not dramatically, not with a big movement, just a small, clean rotation of his torso that put her fist past his shoulder with room to spare. Sakura blinked. She threw a second jab, faster, and Naruto rolled under it and came up on her left side before she'd finished the extension. She stopped. Stared at him. "You read that," she said. "Yeah. You read that before I finished the decision to throw it." Her voice had shifted, the processing mode, full engagement. "Your sensory processing." Griv said the seals were dulling it. "This is," she threw a real strike, fast and directed, the kind she used in actual training. Naruto blocked it, redirected, stepped into her space and stopped with 2 fingers resting lightly against her collarbone. The whole thing had taken about a second and a half. Sakura looked down at his fingers. Looked up at his face. Her expression was doing the cracking thing that Kakashi's had done, shock and happiness and something underneath both of them that was close to furious. 20 seals, she said quietly. "That's 20 out of 100. "Yeah," Naruto said. "Naruto." Her voice was very controlled. "I'm going to be very angry about this for a long time. I just want you to know that." "I know," he said. He stepped back from her. "Me too." Sasuke was watching from outside the circle with his arms crossed and that same intent focus, and when Naruto looked at him, something passed between them, not words, not the easy communication that Naruto had with Sakura, but something that worked in the space where words would have been insufficient anyway. An acknowledgement. A recalibration of 2 boys who had been competing against each other for 2 years, one of whom had just discovered that the measuring stick had been quietly warped the entire time. Sasuke's jaw moved slightly. He looked away. Naruto decided to leave that alone for now. They did 3 more sets of 10 that afternoon, with proper intervals between each, sitting in the clearing while the sun tracked west and the light went from full afternoon gold to the long slanted amber of early evening. 30 seals removed. 70 remaining. By the 5th stage, Naruto could hear the individual sounds of Konoha from 2 miles away, not everything, not the overwhelming flood of total sensory expansion, but enough to pick out distinct sounds if he reached for them. A blacksmith at work. Children in the market square. The waterfall that fed the Hokage monument pool. By the 5th stage, his healing had visibly improved. Sakura had confirmed this by making a small test cut on his forearm with a kunai, watching it close in 8 seconds, and writing the time down in her notebook with an expression that suggested she would be doing a great deal of calculations tonight. By the 5th stage, walking felt different. He'd tested it between intervals, moving around the clearing's edge, not running, just walking, and the ground under his feet was a completely different sensory experience than it had been this morning. Every footfall gave him information, the way a skilled tracker read terrain, except Naruto wasn't tracking, he was just walking, and the information came without effort. "You're reading chakra signatures," Griv said, watching him. "From the village," Naruto confirmed. "I can feel, not see, but feel, the signatures of people I know. There's one that's Kakashi's." He nodded at their sensei, who was sitting on a log at the circle's edge and had been very quiet for the last 2 hours. "And one that I think is the old man Hokage, even from here. His signature has a specific." He searched for the word. "Wait." Griv made a note. "The sensory component of your moonborn heritage. The bloodline amplifies chakra sensing beyond standard perceptual limits. At full unsealing, you will be able to map signatures in a significant radius without hand signs." He looked up from his notes. "The deepest seals, the ones directly suppressing the bloodline itself, are still in place. What you're feeling now is the overflow. The bloodline finding cracks in the remaining suppression and seeping through. Like water finding cracks in a dam," Naruto said. "Exactly like that." Kakashi had been quiet long enough that his speaking made everyone look at him. "How strong is the moonborn bloodline?" he asked Griv. "Historically. What is it actually capable of?" Griv set down his pen and seemed to consider how to answer. "The moonborn were the reason Uzumaki was destroyed," he said finally. "Not the sealing techniques, those were the public reason. The private reason, known to the other great villages but never formally acknowledged, was that Uzumaki had a warrior class that the other powers considered destabilizing. He looked at Naruto. A fully manifested Moonborn could sense any chakra within a 3-mile radius, had a physical transformation state that surpassed most known elevated combat forms, possessed accelerated healing that bordered on regeneration, and could channel lunar chakra through their techniques, essentially a secondary nature release that had no effective counter in the existing elemental system. A pause. There were 11 of them at the time of Uzumaki fall. The combined forces of Kumo, Kiri, and Iwa were necessary to bring the village down. The clearing was very quiet. Kushina was moonborn, Kakashi said. His voice was careful. Feeling something out. Kushina Uzumaki was the last moonborn carrier and the strongest of her generation, Griv confirmed. She suppressed it voluntarily during her time as Jinchuriki because the Nine-Tails chakra and the moonborn transformation were not safely compatible. She managed them separately through tremendous discipline. He looked at Naruto. In you, they have had 12 years to adapt to each other's presence. The compatibility issue that constrained your mother may not apply to you in the same way. Another silence. May not, Naruto said. May not, Griv agreed, with the measured honesty of someone who doesn't lie about uncertainty. Naruto thought about that. Felt the tide in his blood, stronger now than it had been last night, stronger than it had been this morning. Not restless, patient. The same enormous patience it had always had, but warmer now, more immediate. The moon was behind the daytime sky but it was there, and something in him knew it was there with a certainty that was new and old at the same time. We'll find out, he said. We will, Griv said, picking up his pen. Session 2 is tomorrow. I suggest you sleep tonight. He didn't sleep well. Not for bad reasons, nothing fearful, nothing dark, just a body recalibrating, humming at a slightly different frequency than it was used to. Every time he dropped toward sleep something in his chakra system gave a small involuntary pulse, like a muscle twitching as it relaxed after years of tension. He lay on his back in his apartment and listened to Konoha. Really listened, for the first time. The village at 2 in the morning was not silent, it was full of the quiet sounds of 30,000 people breathing and dreaming and living their particular lives. Somewhere 3 streets over a baby was crying. Somewhere further away a couple was arguing in low voices that carried just far enough to be heard but not understood. 2 ANBU were on the rooftops, he could feel their chakra signatures moving in their patrol patterns, steady and professional, arcing around the outer ring of the Hokage compound. He found Kakashi's signature eventually, his apartment, 6 blocks north. Still awake, or waking frequently. The signature had the particular quality of someone lying still but not resting. He found the Hokage tower. The old man was there, sitting at his desk at 2 in the morning, which was not unusual for Hiruzen Sarutobi. But there were 2 other signatures in the room with him, and even from this distance Naruto could feel something in the quality of their chakra, a compression, a guardedness, the way chakra felt when someone was on the defensive. The Kogarashi notification had arrived. Naruto stared at the ceiling of his apartment and felt the conversation happening 6 blocks and a political lifetime away, and thought about what Griv had said, people who have maintained a secret for 12 years will react very quickly. He didn't feel afraid. He checked for fear the way you checked for weather, looked for it honestly, without prejudice, and it wasn't there. What was there instead was the quiet coal, and under the coal, the tide. He was 30 seals lighter than he'd been yesterday morning. He had 70 to go. Let them move quickly. The Hokage summoned him at 8 in the morning. Not a request, a summons, delivered by an ANBU in a bear mask who knocked on his door at 7:45 while Naruto was eating breakfast and told him to present himself at the tower within 15 minutes. Naruto ate the rest of his toast, changed into a clean version of his usual gear, and got there in 10. Hiruzen Sarutobi was standing at the window when Naruto entered, his back to the room, his hands clasped behind him. He turned when Naruto came in, and Naruto read his face the way he'd been doing since he was small, the old man's expressions were a complicated map, and Naruto had spent years learning to read them. Today the map showed something he'd seen in various forms before but never quite so clearly, the look of a man who had made choices he believed were correct, looking at the consequences of those choices, and discovering that the distance between correct and right was larger than he'd calculated. Naruto, Hiruzen said. Hokage-sama, Naruto said. He stood straight and didn't fidget, which was not natural for him but felt appropriate this morning. The Hokage gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit down. I'll stand. Not rude. Just clear. Hiruzen's eyes moved over him, registering the tone of it, the posture of it. He gave a small nod. You received the Kogarashi report, Naruto said. Last evening, yes. Hiruzen moved to his desk and sat, which put him in the more formal position while Naruto remained standing in the informal center of the room, a reversal of the usual power geography in this office, and the old man was aware of it. I want to begin by saying, did you know? Naruto asked. A pause. No, Hiruzen said. Not the full scope of it. I knew, he stopped, and the look on his face became more complicated. I knew in the early years that Danzo had concerns about the moonborn bloodline. I knew he had argued for certain precautionary measures. I instructed him that no action was to be taken without my explicit authorization. And you trusted that he'd followed that instruction. The old man's hands were flat on his desk. Yes. For 12 years. Yes. Naruto was quiet for a moment. The coal in his chest was very still. You thought he was just arguing about it in council sessions. I thought the matter had been tabled. I should have. Hiruzen stopped again. When he started speaking again, his voice was careful in the way of someone not making excuses. I should have verified. I should have been more thorough. What was done to you was done without my knowledge or sanction, but the failure to discover it sooner is mine. He met Naruto's eyes. I am sorry, Naruto. Naruto looked at him. The old man looked back, not hiding from it, not deflecting, wearing the weight of it on his face with the dignity of someone who understood that the weight was appropriate. I know you are, Naruto said. I also know that being sorry doesn't put the years back. He held Hiruzen's gaze. I'm not here to have this fight today. I'm here because the unsealing is ongoing and I'm going to continue it regardless of what the council says, and I wanted you to know directly from me. Hiruzen nodded slowly. I would not stop you. Good. Naruto turned toward the door. He stopped at it. Kakashi-sensei didn't know either. That's not up for debate. He didn't know. He looked back over his shoulder. Make sure that's understood. Hiruzen met his eyes. It is understood. Naruto left. Griv was waiting in the training clearing with his materials already arranged, which meant he'd been there early, motivated, perhaps, by the same sense of urgency that had gotten Naruto out of his apartment at a run. Kakashi was there too, standing at the edge of the circle with Sakura, both of them clearly having talked to each other before arriving. Kakashi's posture had changed from yesterday, less controlled, more present, the way he looked when something had broken through his habitual careful distance. His eye tracked Naruto from the moment he appeared through the tree line. Sasuke came through the trees about 30 seconds after Naruto, from a different direction, which meant he'd been here already and had been doing something, training, probably, burning through the restless energy that Sasuke deployed against every emotional problem he had. How was the Hokage? Griv asked, setting up his disc. Appropriately guilty, Naruto said, sitting in the circle. He didn't know. Danzo ran this independently. That is consistent with what I found in the sealing style analysis. Griv crouched over his markers. The construction is Danzo's personal sealing signature. I confirmed it against archived Konoha documents this morning. He had 2 assistants. I believe I know who they were, but I need one more day to confirm. He looked up. What I can tell you is that neither was Sarutobi. His sealing signature is absent from every layer. Something in Kakashi's shoulders settled. Stages 6 through 9 today, Griv continued. That will take us to 90. The final 10, he paused, the final 10 are different. They are the bloodline seals. I want to wait until I have confirmed the full sequence of removal and the compatibility analysis is complete. How long? Naruto asked. 2 days. Possibly 3. Naruto breathed out. All right. There is one additional thing I want to prepare you for. Griv set down his pen and gave Naruto his full attention. The seals we are removing today are the ones placed closest to your body's natural chakra matrix, the ones that have been pressing hardest against your native systems for the longest time. When they release, the response may be more physical than the earlier stages. He held Naruto's gaze. Your body may react. Stay in the circle. Stay still if you can. Do not fight the release, let it move through you. What kind of physical response? Sakura asked, pen already moving. Involuntary chakra pulse. Possible visible aura. In some cases, brief sensory overload. Griv's voice was measured. Nothing dangerous. But it may be surprising if you're unprepared for it. Do it, Naruto said. The 6th stage felt like being struck by lightning from the inside. Not painfully, that was the strangest part of it, that it wasn't pain, but with a force that moved through him from skull to soles in a single enormous wave, and the clearing went sharp around him, every detail crisp and blazing, and his chakra didn't just expand this time, it roared, a single sustained pulse that blew outward from him in a visible shockwave and rustled every leaf on every tree in the clearing simultaneously. Sasuke stepped back. Sakura grabbed a nearby trunk for balance. Kakashi didn't move. He stood in the wave of chakra with his hands in his pockets and his jaw set and let it wash over him, and his eye was fixed on Naruto with an expression that Naruto had never seen on his face before, something stripped down, something without the protective layer of irony or careful distance, something that was just this is my student and this is what was taken from him and I am seeing it now. The wave settled. The clearing went back to being a clearing. Naruto sat in the circle and breathed and felt the new space in his chest, enormous and ringing, like a bell that had just been struck for the first time. 6, Griv said quietly. Yeah, Naruto said. His voice was different, deeper somehow, or more present, or simply more himself. Something had shifted in the texture of it. They went through 7, 8, and 9. By 9, Naruto had stopped noticing individual changes because the accumulation had crossed some threshold where quantity became quality. He wasn't just sensing more, he was sensing differently. The world had a dimensionality to it that it hadn't had this morning. Chakra signatures were visible to him now the way colors were visible, without effort, without reaching, just present, part of what he perceived. Kakashi's signature was the brilliant silver white of compressed lightning and old ink, disciplined and layered. Sakura's was a deep clean green, steady and strong, with flickers of rose pink at the edges where her precise chakra control created fine detail variations. Sasuke's was the deep blue of a gas flame, intense, focused, with coiling edges of something Naruto recognized as the Sharingan's particular energy, the legacy of Indra running in a direct line from every Uchiha who had ever lived. Griv's was amber, like his eyes, and very old feeling. Patient. And underneath all of them, underneath everything, was the moon. Not visible. Not present in any way he could physically point to. But there, the way gravity was there, constant, enormous, absolutely certain of itself, and pulling at the tide in Naruto's blood with an insistence that was going to be very hard to ignore come nightfall. That's all for today, Griv said, standing and brushing grass from his knees with precise little movements. 10 more tomorrow, and then we will reassess the final 10. Naruto stood. The ground under his feet was a rich and complex landscape of pressure and texture and information. The trees were alive in ways he could feel. The air tasted like the afternoon and the coming evening in somewhere to the east, rain. He stood in the clearing with 90 seals removed, no, with 90 seals remaining, 60 removed, and felt himself like a window someone had started cleaning. Still dirty. Still obstructed. But light coming through in new angles and the cleaner parts blazing. Tomorrow, he said. Sasuke had pushed off the tree he'd been leaning against and was standing in the open space of the clearing, his arms loose at his sides, looking at Naruto with an expression that had finally resolved completely into something Naruto recognized. Not jealousy. Something more complicated. Something like, I have been competing with you since day one, and every result I came back was valid because the field was tilted, but the field being tilted doesn't change the fact that you were keeping up anyway, and I need to think about what that means. Naruto, Sasuke said. Yeah. A pause. Sasuke's jaw worked slightly. Then, spar with me. Griv opened his mouth. I know, Sasuke said without looking at him. Not inside the circle. And I heard what you said about chakra spikes. He looked at Naruto. Taijutsu only. 5 minutes. Naruto studied him for a moment. Felt the new sensory depth, the humming space in his chakra pathways, the specific quality of Sasuke's signature, focused and challenging, the way it always was. Sure, Naruto said. They moved to the open ground outside the stone markers. No preamble, Sasuke came at him immediately, a fast combination of strikes that Naruto had seen him deploy in the Chunin exam qualifiers, measured and precise and building into a takedown attempt. Naruto didn't dodge. He read the combination, felt it before it arrived, the chakra signature shifting to match the intention, telegraphing the direction and speed with a clarity that was extraordinary, and stepped into it, inside Sasuke's guard, and put him on the ground with a clean reversal that Sasuke hadn't seen coming. It lasted about 3 seconds. Sasuke lay on his back in the grass. He looked up at the sky. His expression was very controlled. Again, he said. They went for 10 minutes. Sasuke adjusted each time, reading the new variables, pushing Naruto into new situations, and Naruto met each one, not perfectly, not without being pressed, but with a fluency and responsiveness that made every previous sparring session between them look like a different story. Because it had been. The old story had been written with borrowed gravity, and this was the real text. When they stopped, both breathing hard, Sasuke sitting on the ground and Naruto crouching across from him, neither of them spoke for a moment. Tomorrow, Sasuke said finally. When the next 10 come off. I know, Naruto said. I'll be here. It was the most Sasuke thing he'd ever said, and it meant something considerable, and they both knew it, and neither of them said any more about it. The clearing filled with late afternoon quiet. Griv was packing his materials with his usual precision, Sakura was finishing her notes, Kakashi was looking at the patch of sky visible through the tree canopy with an expression Naruto couldn't see clearly from this angle. 60 seals down. 40 to go. And somewhere in the remaining 40, sitting deep and patient and absolutely certain of itself, was the thing his mother had left him. The thing that had been sitting in the dark for 12 years, learning the sound of his heartbeat. Naruto straightened up, rolled his shoulders, and looked at the late sky. 3 more days. Chapter 3, The Moon remembers the rain Naruto had tasted in the air that afternoon arrived at midnight and didn't leave. It came in sideways off the mountains, the kind of rain that had opinions about where it wanted to go, drumming against roof tiles and running down the streets in small urgent rivers. Naruto sat on his windowsill with his feet dangling outside and let it soak his pants because the sensation of it was extraordinary, every drop a distinct point of contact, cool and specific, the collective sound of it a layered thing he could separate into components if he tried. Rain on stone. Rain on wood. Rain on the leaves of the tree at the corner of his building that had been there since before the village was founded according to the plaque on its trunk. He wasn't sleeping. He'd tried for an hour and given up. His chakra wouldn't settle. Not in a painful way, not a medical way, just the hum of a system that had spent 12 years compressed into a tight space and was now spreading into available volume, slow and inexorable, like dough rising. Every time he dropped towards sleep, something in the circuitry gave an involuntary pulse and he'd surface again, alert and restless, his senses cataloging the village with the enthusiasm of something new. He knew where everyone was without trying. Kakashi was awake again, his signature 3 blocks north, pacing. Naruto could tell from the movement pattern. Short circuits, same path, the way Kakashi moved when he was thinking hard about something uncomfortable. The Hokage Tower had 2 signatures that hadn't been there yesterday. Visitors, or people who'd been summoned. They'd arrived an hour ago and hadn't left. There was a signature at the village's eastern edge that Naruto didn't recognize, moving deliberately, parallel to the wall, and it had a particular quality to it that he was learning to associate with concealment, the way a chakra signature felt when someone was actively trying not to be felt. He filed it. Watched it. It completed its circuit and went still inside a building near the outer market. Surveillance. Someone watching something, or being watched. He filed that too. The rain ran down his face and neck and soaked through his jacket, and he sat with his legs swinging over the 3-story drop and let his awareness open as wide as it would go, which was further than it had been yesterday and not as far as it would be in 3 days, and felt the strange vertiginous pleasure of being present in a world that had apparently always been this detailed and that he'd been perceiving through frosted glass. 40 seals left. He thought about Griv's voice saying the final 10 are the bloodline seals with the careful precision of someone flagging something significant, and he thought about the tide in his blood that was running stronger than it had 2 days ago, more insistent, more aware of the moon above the rain clouds. He thought about his mother. He didn't have much to think with, a photograph from the Hokage's files that Hiruzen had shown him when he was 8, a girl with long red hair and a big smile and chakra chains crackling gold around her wrists. Stories, a few of them, told in the careful way adults told stories about people who were gone. The Ninetales moment during the last exam, the brief vision of her standing between him and the fox's full power with her hands out, a mother's love is the strongest chakra there is, brat, so shut up and let me help you. She'd had this. This thing pressing against the inside of his ribs, this tide. She'd managed it alongside the fox through sheer discipline, kept 2 enormous forces running parallel inside herself without letting them collide, because she didn't have the option of letting them collide. He had her blood and his father's seal and 12 years of the 2 sitting next to each other in the dark, and whatever they'd become in that time was something Griv was being careful about, and the carefulness told Naruto more than the words did. He swung his legs back inside when the rain picked up enough to be genuinely unpleasant, closed the window most of the way, and lay down on his bed and stared at the ceiling and counted down from 100 until he reached 0 and started over, which was something Irika had taught him years ago for nights when his head was too loud. He was on his 3rd countdown when he fell asleep, finally, at somewhere past 2 in the morning. He dreamed about the moon. By morning the rain had dropped to a light drizzle and Sasuke was in the training clearing before any of them. Naruto found him there when he arrived 20 minutes before the agreed time, going through a kata in the wet grass with the water running off his dark hair and his hands moving through the precise architecture of Uchiha Taijutsu like he'd been at it for hours. He probably had. Naruto leaned against a tree at the clearing's edge and watched him without announcing himself, because the sensory advantage was new enough to still be interesting. Sasuke's chakra signature in the morning drizzle was different from yesterday, still the deep blue of a gas flame, still focused and intense, but with something agitated running underneath it. The coiling Sharingan energy was tighter. He'd been thinking hard and the thinking had translated into physical work, the way it always did for Sasuke. After 30 seconds Sasuke said, without breaking the kata, "I know you're there." "Your range is getting better," Naruto said. "My range was always fine. Your footsteps are louder than you think." Sasuke finished the form, shook water off his hands. "Griv said 9 this morning and 1 remaining." 10, Naruto said. "Stages 10 through 18. That's 80 total. Then the bloodline seals. Day after tomorrow. He wants to run compatibility analysis today while we do the regular unsealing." Sasuke turned around. His expression in the gray morning light was the settled, intent look of someone who had processed something overnight and come out the other side of it with a position. The compatibility issue. The Ninetales and the Moonborn. Griv thinks it may not be a problem for me the way it was for my mother. Naruto pushed off the tree and walked into the clearing. He's not certain. What's the worst case if the compatibility is bad? I don't know exactly. Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it. Sasuke's voice wasn't unkind. Just direct. He looked at Naruto steadily. The Nine Tails is the largest chakra mass in existence. The Moonborn transformation is a second enormous energy system. If they destabilize each other, it could be bad, Naruto said. Flat. Honest. For me and for anyone nearby. How bad? Griv used the phrase catastrophic mutual release. Which means they blow through each other and through me simultaneously. He held Sasuke's gaze. He also said the 12 years of cohabitation may have solved the problem without anyone's help. That they may have adapted to each other in ways my mother's didn't because she kept them deliberately separate. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. So it could be fine. It could be fine. Or it could be catastrophic. Or it could be catastrophic. A beat. Sasuke's jaw set. Okay, he said, which was the Sasuke version of I'm standing here regardless. Naruto nodded. Okay. Griv arrived 4 minutes later with his materials under his arm and his amber eyes already doing the careful calculation thing, followed closely by Sakura who had clearly been up early. Her notes from yesterday were tabbed and color-coded in a way that suggested at least 2 hours of preparation. Kakashi came last, just before the agreed time, with the specific controlled expression of someone who had done a great deal of thinking overnight and arrived at a position of functional calm that cost him something to maintain. He looked at Naruto when he came through the trees. A steady, clear look that lasted about 3 seconds. Naruto gave him a small nod. Kakashi's eye curved slightly. They got to work. Stages 10 through 13 were smooth, the releases still significant, still expanding and brightening the world around Naruto in increments, but his system had developed a familiarity with the process now, the pathways learning the rhythm of opening rather than fighting the unfamiliar sensation of it. Each set of 10 released a cluster of capability that settled in within minutes, the new capacity assimilating cleanly. By 13, he could maintain a shadow clone. He tested it between intervals, forming one and watching it stand before him, that was startlingly more solid than his clones had ever been. Stronger. More coherent. It held its form without the slight translucent instability that his clones had always had. That's just chakra volume, Sakura said from her note-taking position, watching the clone with her head tilted. Your chakra output is higher now, so the clone structure is denser. It should also last significantly longer. The clone looked at Naruto. This is weird, the clone said. Yeah, Naruto agreed. This is very weird. I know. He dismissed it. Between stage 14 and 15, while Griv was running the compatibility analysis, a different process, involving the disc and a second device that Naruto hadn't seen before, which seemed to map the interaction points between the fox's chakra and his own, Kakashi sat down in the grass beside Naruto and was quiet for a moment. Then, I've been going back through our training sessions. Don't, Naruto said. I need to. Kakashi-sensei, I assigned difficulty levels based on your performance assessment. I calibrated everything to your apparent ceiling. Kakashi's voice was level, but under it was something that had been there since yesterday and wasn't getting quieter. I thought you hit hard for your baseline but that your baseline was genuinely limited. I built all of it around that assumption. You didn't know. That's not, Kakashi stopped. Started again, more carefully. Being unaware of the sabotage doesn't change the outcome of the training design. You could have been learning at a completely different level. You could have. Don't finish that sentence, Naruto said quietly. Kakashi looked at him. Don't tell me what I could have been. I know what I could have been. Naruto turned to meet his sensei's eye, steady, clear, not angry. I could spend the next month going over all of it. Every training session, every exam result, every time I came second to someone I should have been ahead of. I could make a very long list. He paused. Or I can take what's coming back to me and actually use it. The sound of rain in the branches above them, light and irregular. The mission in wave, Kakashi said. Not giving it up, but shifting the direction of it. Kakashi-sensei. You held your own against Zabuza's clones. Against Haku. Under suppression so heavy it's a wonder you could use chakra at all, you held your own against opponents that should have killed you. The controlled quality of Kakashi's voice had changed, something underneath it now, raw-edged. I watched you do it and I thought, he just won't quit, that kid, and I was proud of it, the won't quit, but I missed entirely what it actually meant. Naruto was quiet for a moment. What did it mean? He asked. It meant you were fighting with one hand tied behind your back and both eyes half shut and doing it anyway, and I called it heart and didn't look for the reason. Kakashi's I met his. Direct. Unguarded in a way Kakashi almost never let himself be. I'm sorry. Naruto looked at him. At the visible eye that had seen a lot and closed off more and was currently open all the way, no clever distance, no protective levity. I know you are, Naruto said. And I'm telling you to stop, because the guilt is going to slow you down and I need you at full speed. Okay. A pause. The corner of Kakashi's eye crinkled, reluctant. That was almost a Kakashi thing to say. I learned from the best, Naruto said. Now get up. Griv's ready for 14. Stage 16 was where things changed. Griv called it before they started, stood over his stone markers with a slightly different expression than the previous stages, more focused, the amber eyes sharper. This cluster is deep, he said. These seals are the ones that were placed when you were an infant. They've had the longest time to integrate with your system, which means their removal will be felt more acutely than the others. How acutely? Sakura asked. Stand back from the circle, Griv told her, which answered the question. She moved. Sasuke and Kakashi moved with her, the three of them arraying themselves 10 feet from the stone markers with the unconscious readiness of people who moved in combat configurations out of habit. Naruto sat in the center and closed his eyes. The disc hummed to life above his head. Griv spoke the syllables. The releases came, not clicks this time, but something deeper, more structural, like the sound a locked door makes when the bolt finally gives after years of rust. 1, 2, 3, each one wrenching something fundamental, not painful but enormous, the way a too-tight knot finally loosening felt enormous, felt like release that was almost indistinguishable from 10. The world came apart and came back together. Naruto didn't move. He sat in the circle and felt his chakra system completely reorder itself around the new space, 80 seals gone, 20 remaining, and the 20 that were left were the outermost ring around the bloodline itself, which meant they were now the only thing between him and what his mother had left him, and the tide in his blood knew it. The tide was not patient anymore. He opened his eyes. The clearing was bathed in something, not light, exactly, and not chakra the way he'd understood chakra before. Something that was both. Something that was coming from him, a faint silver-white luminescence that he could feel at the edges of his vision, pulsing in time with his heartbeat, the same color as the innermost ring on Griv's disc. The unnamed color between silver and violet. Moonlight if moonlight had temperature. The trees were electric with it. His own hands were traced in it, like someone had drawn his veins in pale fire. Naruto, Sakura breathed. He looked at her. Her chakra signature was still the clean deep green he'd learned yesterday, but now there was more. He could see the specific mechanisms of it, the way she channeled and concentrated in the medical pathways, the incredible precision of her control, detail he hadn't been able to perceive before. He could see the effort behind her stillness, the way she was holding very still and very calm because she was worried and didn't want to show it. I'm okay, he told her. You're glowing, she said. I noticed. The luminescence faded gradually over the next 2 minutes, not gone, he suspected, just too faint to see in daylight, and the world returned to its normal visible state while remaining richer than it had been 30 minutes ago in all the ways that mattered to the senses beyond sight. Stabilization interval, Griv said. He was writing in his ledger and his hand was steady and his voice was professional, but he was writing faster than usual. 30 minutes minimum. No sparring. No chakra use. Just sit. Naruto sat. For the first time since they'd started the unsealing process, he obeyed the stabilization instruction completely, without the restless push against the boundary of it. Because the tide was very close now. He could feel it like a physical thing, like standing chest deep in water and feeling the undertow, enormous and certain, and the 20 remaining seals were the only thing between him and its full force. He wanted to be careful. Not afraid. Just careful, the specific carefulness of someone who understood what they were handling. Sasuke sat down in the grass beside him during the stabilization interval, not asking, just settling there. He didn't say anything. Neither did Naruto. It was the kind of company that didn't need to announce itself. After a few minutes Sasuke said, "The luminescence. The moonborn chakra bleeding through the remaining seals," Naruto said. "Is it always going to do that?" Naruto considered. "I don't know. Griv might know." "It's visible," Sasuke said. In a combat context I'm not going to be trying to hide," Naruto said flatly. A pause. "Fair. I'm aware it's visible. I'm not particularly worried about it." Naruto looked at his hands, where the faint silver white was just barely perceptible in the morning light if you knew to look. "People have been underestimating what I am for 12 years because someone made sure they had reasons to. I'm not interested in managing that perception anymore." Sasuke was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "You wouldn't be." Something in his voice that was neither agreement nor disagreement, just recognition. The tone of someone recalibrating an ongoing assessment and arriving at a new number. Stage 17 came and went, smoother, the chakra system having developed a real fluency with the process by now, the release is clean and the expansion immediate and absorbed without drama. Stage 18, the last before the final bloodline seals, was the most significant single release yet, not in the destabilizing way of 16, but in pure scope, the sheer volume of chakra that returned like a tide coming in, enormous and sure, filling the last available space in the expanded pathways. When Naruto stood up from the stone circle after stage 18, the grass around him was flat. Not dramatically, not scorched or damaged, just pressed down, as if a strong wind had passed through at ground level. Griv's loose papers were under his hand, weighted. Sakura's hair had moved. 90 seals down. 10 remaining. Naruto stood in the training clearing in the light drizzle with his hands at his sides and felt himself at 90% of what he was supposed to be, fully loaded compared to yesterday, barely loaded compared to tomorrow, and the world was extraordinary. The rain on his face was 100 distinct sensations. The chakra signatures of his team were like colored flames in his peripheral awareness. The village behind him was a living map, 30,000 signatures in various states of activity, the Hokage's tower a bright concentration of purpose, the hospital a dense warm cluster, the training ground scattered with the sharp focused points of shinobi at work. And through the cloud cover, through the rain and the gray morning sky, pulling at the tide in his blood with an insistence that was no longer going to be satisfied with 12 more hours, the moon. Griv looked up from his ledger. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll have the compatibility analysis complete by morning. If the results are what I think they will be, we proceed with the final 10 afternoon. And if the results aren't what you think?" Kakashi asked. Griv considered. "Then we proceed with additional precautions." "What kind of precautions?" Sakura asked. "The kind that would require a slightly larger clearing," Griv said, and left it there. The day moved slowly, the way days did when you were waiting for something significant, each hour thick and deliberate. Naruto trained. Not with the team, they had their own obligations, their own missions and duties, but alone, in a different clearing, methodically relearning what he could do. Not the new things, not yet, those required the final seals first. Just the old things, the techniques he'd been building for years, run through the new chassis and measured against the new standard. The Rasengan first. He formed it in his palm and stared at it, and the difference was immediately and breathtakingly obvious. Not in the form of it, the dense rotating sphere of compressed chakra was the same shape it had always been, but in the density. Heavier. More compact. Spinning faster without more effort, the concentration deeper, the edges cleaner. He threw it at a training post. The post exploded. Not metaphorically, not broke convincingly, exploded, the wood reduced to splinters across a 15-foot radius, the base uprooted and flung backward. Naruto stood in the aftermath with wood chips in his hair and looked at the hole where the training post had been and said nothing for a moment. Then he formed another Rasengan, looked at the next post, and very deliberately reduced the output to match what he used to be able to do. The deliberateness of it, the conscious choosing to use less than he had, felt like a choice in a way it had never felt before. Because it had never been a choice before. He ran through his clone arsenal. Made 12 shadow clones, and each one was more solid and coherent than anything he'd produced before, each one an actual functional extension of himself rather than the mildly translucent echoes he'd been working with. He ran combat patterns with them and felt the information flow from each clone with a clarity that made the multi-clone training methods that had always felt slightly chaotic into something precise and strategic. He worked for 3 hours and didn't come close to the edge of his chakra reserves, which was a new experience. He'd always run hard limits, not today. Today he trained and the reserves replenished as fast as he drew from them, the system at 90% of full capacity running like a river in spring flood. He thought about the final 10, and what was behind them. Evening came gray and cool, the drizzle finally tapering off around sundown, leaving the village washed and quiet. Naruto was sitting on the roof of his building eating takeout when Kakashi appeared at the roof access door with his book in one hand and said nothing, just settled down a few feet away and opened the book to the middle and pretended to read. Naruto offered him his second container of dumplings without looking at him. Kakashi took one dumpling with precise fingers, ate it, and said, "The 2 signatures in the Hokage Tower last night." "You noticed them too," Naruto said. Hamura and Koharu arrived at the tower at 1:15 in the morning. Kakashi's voice was measured. The meeting lasted 2 hours. The Sandaime issued a directive this afternoon confining both of them to advisory roles pending investigation. Naruto stopped eating. "Not removed," Kakashi said. "Confined. It's a preliminary step, legal groundwork. The Kogarashi report has to be formally reviewed by the village's judicial council before punitive action can be taken, and that process takes time." He ate another dumpling. Danzo, notably, was not at the meeting. "He's not been seen since yesterday morning." "He's not gone," Naruto said. He'd been tracking Danzo's signature, he'd identified it 2 days ago, learned its quality and weight, the dark compressed feeling of old root-style chakra discipline, and he'd been keeping its location logged with the constant background awareness that had become second nature. "He's in the lower village. Below the administrative district." Kakashi turned a page. "You can track him." "From here, yeah. He's moving, but he's not leaving." Naruto looked at the roofline of the village spreading out before them, the last evening light catching the tops of buildings. "He's doing something. I don't know what yet." Kakashi closed his book. He looked at Naruto directly. "When the final seals come off tomorrow, I know. Danzo won't wait for the judicial process to run its course. He never has." Kakashi's visible eye was serious. "He'll move before then. Let him." Naruto's voice was completely even. "I've been underestimated my entire shinobi life because someone made sure the evidence justified it. Whatever he's planning it against a version of me that stopped existing 2 days ago." Kakashi looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up the dumpling container, took another one, and reopened his book. "Okay," he said. They sat on the roof in the quiet evening and didn't need to say anything else. The moon rose at 10:47. Naruto was sitting on his windowsill again, same position, same open window, except the rain was gone and the sky was clearing and the moon was full, enormous, climbing above the mountain ridgeline with the unhurried certainty of something that had always been there and would always be there. He felt it the moment it crested the ridge. Felt it the way you felt a sound that was too low for hearing, in your bones, in the liquid parts of you, in the tide that was no longer patiently waiting but pressing, actively pressing, against the 20 remaining seals like water against a dam whose mortar had been weakening for 2 days. He breathed out slowly. He was not afraid. He'd checked. The moon climbed and the tide pushed and Naruto sat in the window and held the boundary steady with the same focused discipline that had gotten him through every impossible thing in 12 years of impossible things, because whatever happened tonight, whatever the 10 remaining seals held or didn't hold, he was going to meet it upright and clear-eyed. The first crack appeared at midnight. Not physical, he felt it rather than heard it, a tiny fracture in one of the bloodline seals, the pressure too much for a seal that had been maintained for 12 years against a force that had grown stronger every day it was contained. A hairline crack, the kind that let light through. The light that came through was silver. It ran up his left arm like a vein being illuminated from inside, from wrist to shoulder, a single elegant line of silver white that faded in 3 seconds and left his skin tingling. He stared at his arm in the moonlight and felt the seal around the crack trying to compensate, the containment field tightening against the breach. It didn't fully seal again. There were 9 other cracks now, hairline fractures in each of the remaining bloodline seals, because when one went under enough pressure they all redistributed the stress and they all got weaker simultaneously. The tide was not waiting for tomorrow. Naruto swung off the windowsill and grabbed his jacket and was halfway down the stairs before he'd fully decided to go, operating on something older and more certain than decision. He ran to the training clearing. Not for any particular reason, just that it was open, and familiar, and away from people, and large enough for whatever was going to happen. The full moon was directly overhead by the time he got there, the clearing silver-washed and shadow-sharp, the trees a dark ring around open ground. He stood in the center of the grass, in the same spot where the stone circle had been, where Griv's markers had been placed and removed, and looked up at the moon. It looked back. Not metaphorically. He could feel it looking, the gravitational attention of it, the specific and personal force of it on the tide in his blood, as though the moon had always known he was there and had been waiting for this latitude of this night in this clearing. He spread his arms slightly. Opened his chakra pathways completely the way Griv had taught him. The seals broke. Not catastrophically, not all at once, not the flood that would have happened if Griv had tried to remove all 100 on the first day. They broke the way they were meant to break eventually, in sequence, in a wave from the outermost remaining seal to the innermost, each one fracturing and dissolving into the night air like ice in warm water, and the tide came through. It came through all at once and it was enormous. The grass around Naruto flattened to the ground and the trees bent slightly at the edges and the silver light that had been hairline fractures became something he couldn't contain even if he'd wanted to, blazing from his skin in the moonlit clearing, following the lines of his chakra pathways like circuitry, the unnamed color between silver and violet tracing every nerve and vein in a full-body diagram that was briefly, breathtakingly visible. His feet lifted slightly off the ground. Just slightly, inches, not dramatically, the gravitational pull of the lunar chakra equalizing with the Earth's gravity in a moment of equilibrium that lasted about 5 seconds and then resolved. He came back down. The light faded to a steady silver glow. The grass stayed flat. Naruto stood in the moonlit clearing and breathed and felt what he was. All of it. Every component. The wind chakra, vast and clean. The Ninetales power deep and enormous, a sleeping sun at the center of his system. And running through and around and between all of it, the moonborn bloodline, not separate from the other two, not in conflict, but woven through them like silver thread through cloth, integrated in a way that 12 years of cohabitation had apparently made possible, the incompatibility that had constrained Kushina simply not present in her son. They had adapted to each other in the dark. All 3 of them. All his life. He laughed. It came out of nowhere, genuine and uncalculated, a single short laugh at the strangeness and rightness of it, at 12 years of chains that had come off one at a time over 4 days and had now completely given way, at the fact that the moon was full and overhead and the silver light was running through him, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "That," said a voice from the tree line, "is not what I expected." Naruto turned. Kakashi was standing at the clearing's edge in his ANBU posture, which he'd never fully lost, which showed up when things were serious, with his hands loose at his sides and his visible eye fixed on Naruto with an expression that was somewhere he'd never been before. Past surprise. Past the careful processing Kakashi did with everything. Into something open and unguarded that didn't have a name. "How long have you been there?" Naruto asked. "About 40 seconds. Kakashi came forward slowly, into the moonlight. "I felt your chakra spike from home. I came to," he stopped. He was looking at the silver light running through Naruto's skin in faint steady lines, visible against the moonlight, not alarming, not violent, just present, just there. "I came to make sure you were." "I'm fine," Naruto said. "I can see that." Kakashi stopped about 10 feet away. He looked at Naruto the way you looked at something you needed to understand fully before you could respond to it. "All 10. "All 10, Naruto confirmed. They went on their own. The pressure was too much. Griv said tomorrow. The moon didn't know about Griv's schedule." Naruto looked at his own hands, where the silver light traced the lines of his palms like a second set of lifelines. "The compatibility isn't a problem. They've been living together for 12 years. They know each other." Kakashi breathed out slowly. The tension that had been in his posture, the readiness to intervene, to help, to do something, left him in that breath, and what replaced it was a different quality of stillness. The stillness of someone looking at something finished rather than something in progress. "Can you control it?" he asked. Naruto focused, drew the light inward, let the silver glow reduce to a faint shimmer at his fingertips, then dropped it entirely. No light. Then he called it back, steady and deliberate, the full network of lines blazing up his arms and across his shoulders and fading back. On. Off. As easy as breathing. "Yes," he said. Kakashi was quiet for a long time. The clearing was quiet around them, full of moonlight and the sound of the stream and a village sleeping 2 miles away. Somewhere to the east an owl called once and then went silent. "Your mother," Kakashi said finally. Not a question. Something he was handing over, carefully. "Yeah," Naruto said. "She would have." Kakashi stopped. He looked at the moonlit clearing, the bent grass, the silver traces fading from the air. "She would have had something extremely loud and emotional to say right now, I think." Naruto snorted. The laugh that had surprised him before came back in a smaller version, warm and involuntary. "Yeah. She would have." Kakashi looked at him, and this was the unguarded look again, the one without the careful distance, the one that Naruto had seen only twice in 3 days and was still learning the shape of. "I taught you to be an excellent shinobi," Kakashi said. "I want you to know that the parts that made you one, the stubbornness, the refusal to quit, the way you faced everything head-on even when the ceiling was made of concrete, those were never the seal's doing." Naruto opened his mouth. "I know you're going to tell me to stop," Kakashi said. "I just needed to say it once. After that I'll stop." "A beat." "Okay," Naruto said. "Once." "Once," Kakashi agreed. Something in his eye curved, not the practiced deflection of the usual version, but something quieter and truer. "What does it feel like?" "The moon born. The whole thing together." Naruto thought about it. He looked up at the full moon overhead, felt the tide, no longer the tide, now, but something that had found its ocean and was simply home, and tried to find words for something that mostly existed in the space between languages. "Like knowing your name," he said. "Not the one people call you. The other one." Kakashi looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slowly, like someone putting something carefully in the right place. "Come on," he said. "It's late." "5 more minutes," Naruto said. He wasn't being difficult. He just wasn't done standing in the moonlight in the clearing where all the stones had finally, after 12 years, come all the way off. Kakashi stopped. Looked at him. Then turned and sat down at the clearing's edge against a tree root, opened his book, and read by moonlight. 5 minutes became 20. Naruto stood in the silver clearing and breathed and felt the moon and the wind and the fox sleeping quiet and vast at his center and the moonborn light running warm and certain through his veins, and was, for the first time in his life, simply and completely himself. No doors. No ceilings. No one else's hands in his architecture. Just Naruto. Chapter 4, The Weight of Names. Danzo moved at dawn. Naruto felt it before he saw it, the dark compressed signature 3 streets below the administrative district suddenly cutting through the morning stillness with the purposeful speed of someone who had made a decision and was now executing it. He was already awake, sitting cross-legged on his apartment floor in the silver pre-dawn light, running through the sensory map of the village the way he'd taken to doing each morning, learning the rhythms of it, who moved when and where and with what quality of chakra. He'd been tracking Danzo's signature for 2 days. He knew its texture, the cold disciplined compression of root training, old and thick, layered with something that felt like deliberately maintained distance from anything that could be called feeling. A chakra signature that had spent decades making itself small and contained and deniable. It wasn't small right now. Naruto was on his feet and at the window in one motion. Danzo's signature was moving east, toward the training grounds, toward the outer wall, and it wasn't alone. 4 others with it, the compact controlled signatures of root operatives who'd learned to suppress themselves to near invisibility. Naruto could feel them anyway, could pick out the individual quality of each one through the noise of 30,000 sleeping people the way you picked out a single voice in a crowd when you knew specifically what you were listening for. 5 total. Moving fast. Moving like people who expected to arrive before anyone knew they were coming. Naruto reached for his jacket. His hand was steady. He sent chakra to 2 shadow clones, didn't form them yet, just had the intention ready, mapped out the message they'd carry. Then he went out the window. The eastern training grounds at dawn were empty except for dew and birdsong and the light coming in low and gold through the tree line. Naruto dropped from the wall onto the grass without sound and felt the 5 signatures arrayed 60 meters north, already positioned, which meant they'd been faster than he tracked or they'd come from a different direction or both. He walked toward them. Not ran. Walked. Because he wasn't afraid, and the distance between not afraid and demonstrably not afraid mattered, and he wanted Danzo to see him walking. Danzo stood at the center of the formation in the gray-gold morning light, leaning on his walking stick with the habitual posture of age and authority. His right eye was covered by bandages. His left eye, brown, sharp, absolutely awake, fixed on Naruto when he emerged from the tree line and tracked him with the careful precision of a man measuring a variable he'd expected to control that was now presenting differently than the model predicted. The 4 root operatives were behind him and to his sides. Blank masks, standard positions, still as furniture. Naruto Uzumaki, Danzo said. His voice was dry and even, the voice of a man who had been in more difficult conversations than this one and come out of all of them intact. Danzo Shimura, Naruto said, stopping 10 meters out. He didn't reach for a weapon. Didn't take a combat stance. Just stood there in the early morning light with his hands at his sides and his chakra completely open, the silver moonborn traces faintly visible at the edges of his skin because the sun was still low enough that the light didn't wash them out. Danzo's eye moved over him. Something shifted in it, a recognition, a recalculation. He'd known about the seals. He'd built them. He knew what their removal would look like. He was running the numbers on what stood across from him now and the numbers were telling him something his plan hadn't fully accounted for. You should have waited, Danzo said. For the judicial process. For the council review. For the proper administrative channels that exist specifically to handle situations like, you came to the training grounds at dawn with 4 root operatives, Naruto said. You're not here to discuss administrative channels. A pause. The birdsong continued in the trees around them, cheerful and indifferent. You're a significant variable, Danzo said. Not apologetic. Not cruel. Just stating terms. What has been unsealed in you represents a destabilizing force that the village is not currently equipped to manage. The moonborn bloodline combined with the Nine-Tails chakra and a Jinchuriki who is, demonstrably, not inclined toward restraint. I'm standing here, Naruto said. Talking to you. That's restraint. Creates a threat profile that the council determined 12 years ago was unacceptable. Danzo's voice hadn't changed. I want you to understand that the decision was not made carelessly or vindicatively. It was made with the village's survival as the primary consideration. The village's survival. Naruto said it back to him, flat. Yes. You sealed a baby. The words came out quiet and specific, not raised, not cracking. You reached into an infant and put the first stones on, and then you came back when he was 3 and put more stones on, and then when he was 6, and then when he was 9, and then when he was 12, and every time you reached into a child and added another lock, you called it the village's survival. Danzo's jaw was set. The alternative was a weapon we couldn't control. I'm not a weapon. All shinobi are weapons. That is the nature of what I'm not a weapon. Naruto's voice was still quiet, but there was something in the quality of it that stopped Danzo mid-sentence. Not volume. Wait. I'm a person. Who had a mother and a father and a bloodline that belonged to me, that you took, and 12 years of capability that should have been mine and wasn't, because you decided your fear of what I might be was more important than what I actually was. He held Danzo's gaze across the 10 meters of dewy morning grass. You were afraid of a baby. And you spent 12 years adding more locks every time you thought about it. Danzo was quiet for a moment. Something moved behind his visible eye, not remorse, not exactly, but something more complicated. The particular look of a man who has held a conviction for so long that the emotional architecture around it has calcified, who is now being shown the actual cost of the conviction by the person who paid it. What I did protected this village, Danzo said. I stand by that. I know you do, Naruto said. That's the saddest part. Then the nearest root operative moved. Not toward Naruto, sideways, repositioning, and the specific geometry of the movement was something Naruto recognized from the hundreds of hours of shadow clone training he'd done in the last 2 days with his restored capabilities, reading tactical formations the way Sakura read medical texts. They were tightening the circle. Getting angles. Don't, Naruto said, without looking at the operative. Still looking at Danzo. The operative stopped. Which was either professionalism or threat assessment, and it didn't matter which. What do you want? Danzo said. You've unsealed yourself. The judicial process is in motion. The Hokage has your Kogarashi documentation. What are you doing here at dawn, Uzumaki? You came to me, Naruto said. I tracked you here. You moved first. Danzo's jaw tightened fractionally. You came because you had a plan and you needed to execute it before the judicial review concludes. Naruto tilted his head slightly. What was the plan? Make me disappear. Make the unsealing look like an accident. Or just, demonstrate to the Hokage that I'm as dangerous as you always said, trigger an emergency containment order, buy yourself time. Danzo's expression didn't change, which told Naruto the shot had landed. You have no proof of, I have your chakra signature, Naruto said simply. I know what you feel like. I've been feeling you move around this village for 2 days, I know your signature as well as I know my own team's. And I know exactly what time you left your house this morning, what route you took, and which route safe house you stopped at to pick up these 4. He paused. Griv can add that to the file. He documents everything. A long silence. The sun had crested the mountains fully now, the dawn light warming from gray to gold. Somewhere in the village the morning was starting, the first market vendors, the early training groups of academy students, the hospital shift change. 30,000 people beginning their day, completely unaware of 5 root operatives and 1 fully unsealed moonborn Jinchuriki standing in the morning grass making decisions that mattered. One of the root operatives shifted. Naruto felt the chakra in tension before the body moved, felt the decision forming in the operative system the way he could now feel intention in anyone close enough to read, and he acted on it without thinking. He didn't reach for a weapon. He pushed a pulse of chakra outward, not a technique, not a directed attack, just a concentric wave of pure moonborn energy radiating from his feet in every direction at ground level, the silver light flashing outward in a ring that hit all 4 root operatives simultaneously. The chakra in each of them stuttered. Not suppressed, not damaged, just disrupted, like a radio signal hit with static, a half-second of interference that broke the intention chain before it could become action. All 4 operatives froze. The whole thing took about 2 seconds. Danzo looked at the 4 frozen operatives. Then he looked at Naruto. Naruto's expression hadn't changed. He hadn't moved from his position, hadn't raised his hands, hadn't shifted into any combat stance. He looked exactly as he had at the beginning of the conversation, standing in the morning light with his hands at his sides. "You want to be careful," Naruto said quietly, "about what you try next." The frozen moment stretched. Then Danzo did something Naruto hadn't predicted. He straightened his walking stick. He looked at Naruto with his visible eye, steady and sharp and very old, and said, "The village will not be well served by what you are." "The village," Naruto said, "will be fine." Danzo turned and walked away. The 4 root operatives unfroze and fell into formation behind him, and in 30 seconds the training ground was empty except for Birdsong and Naruto standing in the morning gold. He breathed out slowly. He hadn't shaken. He checked. He'd been standing in front of the man who had spent 12 years systematically stealing from him, the man whose fear had made a cage of his own blood, and his hands had been steady the entire time. He thought about what Danzo had said, "The village will not be well served by what you are," and felt the coal in his chest, quiet and unchanged. The village was going to be served extraordinarily well by what he was. Danzo would see. Griv arrived at Naruto's apartment 2 hours later with his ledger under his arm and a second, thicker document folder that he set on the table with the careful deliberateness of someone placing something important. "You unsealed early," Griv said, sitting down. "The moon was persuasive," Naruto said, pouring him tea. Griv looked at him over the teacup. His amber eyes ran over the faint silver traces at Naruto's wrists, visible in the morning light, and settled on his face with the focused attention of someone running an assessment. "How is the integration?" "Clean," Naruto said. "Completely clean. No interference between the 3 systems. They've been sharing space for 12 years, they know how to coexist." Griv was quiet for a moment. Then he exhaled, a short, controlled breath that was the most unprofessional sound Naruto had heard from him and which told him that Griv had genuinely been worried about the compatibility issue. "Good," he said. "That's very good. You were worried." "I was cautious," Griv said, which was his version of yes, extremely worried. He opened his folder. The compatibility concern was the only genuine unknown in this process. Kushina's records indicated the 2 systems were fundamentally incompatible, and her management of that incompatibility was what made her such an exceptional Jinchuriki, but it also meant she never experienced either system at full capacity. He set several documents on the table between them. "You have resolved that constraint simply by being born and growing up. By existing for 12 years with no choice about it," Naruto said. "Yes," Griv said, without flinching from the edge of it. The compression the seals imposed had an unintended consequence. It forced the 3 systems to occupy the same space at reduced volume for so long that they reconfigured around each other. When the seals released, they expanded into a configuration that is fundamentally more integrated than your mother's ever was. He paused. "You are not a Jinchuriki who also has a bloodline. You are something that doesn't have a prior category. Naruto sat with that for a moment. Is there a name for it? He asked. Not yet, Griv said, which might have been the most honest thing anyone had ever said to Naruto about what he was. He appreciated it. The Danzo situation, Naruto said, shifting. I confronted him this morning. Griv looked up. He came to me first. I tracked his movement and intercepted. Naruto laid it out cleanly, the pre-dawn movement, the route formation, the conversation, the disruption pulse, Danzo walking away. Griv listened with his pen moving in his ledger, making notes at specific points. When Naruto finished, Griv was quiet for a moment. The chakra disruption pulse, was that deliberate technique or instinctive response? Somewhere between, Naruto said honestly. I knew what they were about to do. The response was fast enough that it was partially instinct, but I was aware of choosing it. Interesting, Griv said, and wrote something. The moonborn sensory detection of intention, the ability to read a chakra signature at the moment of formed intent, before physical action, is one of the bloodline's combat-defining abilities. You're manifesting it earlier than the historical precedents suggest. Because the systems are integrated. Because the systems are integrated, Griv confirmed. You aren't running the moonborn as a separate mode. It's ambient. Always on. He closed his ledger. Danzo walking away is a temporary development. He will not accept this passively. I know. Naruto looked at the documents on the table. What's in the folder? Griv turned it to face him. The Kogarashi formal prosecution file. 117 pages of documented evidence covering the sealing event timeline, the sealing technique analysis identifying Danzo's signature, the financial irregularities used to procure sealing materials through unofficial channels, and, he tapped a section at the back, testimony from 3 Kogarashi clerks who processed what they were told were standard seal maintenance transactions on behalf of senior Konoha administrative personnel over the past 12 years. Naruto looked at the document stack. 117 pages. When does this go to the Hokage? He asked. It was delivered this morning. Along with a formal Kogarashi request for a public accountability hearing within 14 days. Griv met his eyes. Under the inter-village accords, the Hokage is obligated to respond. He cannot defer or decline without triggering a Kogarashi trade sanction, which would freeze every financial transaction Konoha has with Kogarashi-managed accounts. A beat. Which includes approximately 40% of the village's external commerce. You planned this from the beginning, Naruto said slowly. The financial angle. You knew the Hokage would respond to that pressure more reliably than to the moral pressure alone. Griv's expression remained professional. I knew that institutions, regardless of their moral character, respond to structural incentives. It was prudent to ensure multiple motivating factors were present. Naruto looked at him for a moment. Griv. Yes. Thank you. He said it plainly. Not the enthusiastic version, not the Naruto performance of gratitude, the real version, which was quieter and meant more. For running the audit. For the documentation. For all of this. Griv's professional expression did something brief and complicated, like a shutter opening and closing quickly enough to maintain deniability. Our code requires disclosure of asset violations, he said. I did what the code requires. Your code didn't require you to be thorough about it, Naruto said. That was you. Griv picked up his teacup and looked at it. Drink your tea, he said. The formal hearing was scheduled for the following morning. Naruto spent the day that preceded it moving through the village with a new kind of attention, not surveillance, not strategy, just present in a way he hadn't been before, the sensory depth giving everything a richness that he was still learning to navigate. He went to Ichiraku's and ate ramen with Tuchi and Ayam and let the familiar comfort of it sit around him. Tuchi noticed something different without naming it, looked at Naruto across the counter with the careful affection of someone who had fed him since he was small and known that something was always wrong without knowing what, and said, "You look different today, kid." I feel different, Naruto said. Tsuchi nodded like this was sufficient explanation and refilled his bowl. He went to see Irika after, finding him at the academy in the late afternoon after the students had gone. Irika was grading papers at his desk with his reading glasses on and the specific expression of a man encountering the same fundamental misunderstanding of a concept in 23 consecutive papers. He looked up when Naruto came through the door and his expression shifted immediately, the teacher warmth that Irika kept for everyone, and underneath it the particular version he saved for Naruto, which had always been a little different. More personal. More aware of the weight of things. Naruto, he said. Irika-sensei. Naruto sat on the edge of a student desk, which he'd been doing since he was 8 and which Irika had never told him to stop doing. Did you know? The question hung in the afternoon classroom light. Irika set his pen down. About the seals. His voice was careful. About any of it. The bloodline, the seals, what was done. Irika was quiet for a moment. I knew something was wrong, he said finally. Not specifically. Not the seals, not the bloodline, but I knew you were hitting walls that didn't make sense for your capability level. Your chakra control was always erratic in ways that didn't match your effort or your intelligence. He met Naruto's eyes. I thought it was the Ninetales creating interference. I should have pushed for a more thorough assessment. I didn't. A pause. I'm sorry, Naruto. People keep saying that, Naruto said. Not bitterly. Just noting it. Because people keep meaning it, Irika said. That doesn't make it less useful, does it? Naruto thought about it. No, he said. I guess it doesn't. Irika looked at him, really looked, the way teachers looked when they were reading something that had changed. You're different, he said. Not just the chakra. You. Yeah. How? Naruto took a moment with the question. Like, he started, stopped, tried again. You know how I always had to try everything 10 times as hard. Push until I couldn't stand up, then push some more, just to keep pace with everyone else. And I made it a personality, made it the whole Naruto thing, never give up, harder than anyone, I remember. That was real, Naruto said. The determination, the stubbornness, all of it. That was real, and it still is. But it was real because I had to be, not because I chose it. Now, he paused, feeling for the right words, now I could make a different choice. I could be careful and measured and strategic, and I'd still be stronger than most people I'm going to face. He looked at his hands. The personality isn't going anywhere. But it belongs to me now instead of belonging to the circumstances. Irika looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Your mother, he said, was one of the most extraordinary people who ever passed through this village. I didn't know her well, but I knew her reputation. He folded his hands on his desk. She would have had a great deal to say about tomorrow's hearing. Naruto smiled. Kakashi said something similar. She was loud about things that mattered, Irika said, and there was something in his voice that was fond and sad in equal measure. You get that from her. I get a lot from her, Naruto said, looking at the silver traces at his wrists. Irika followed his gaze. He looked at the silver light with the expression of someone encountering something they don't have a framework for and are choosing to experience directly rather than analyze. Beautiful, he said simply. Naruto looked at his wrists. Yeah, he said. It kind of is. The hearing was held in the Hokage's formal council chamber, a room Naruto had been in exactly once before, for an end-of-year team assessment that had lasted 20 minutes and consisted mostly of Kakashi being professionally vague about their progress. The chamber was wide and stone-floored, with high windows that let in columns of morning light and a long table that fit 12 people and currently had 8 at it. Hiruzen sat at the head. Kakashi was to his right. Griv sat at the far end with his document folder open and his stylus ready, his amber eyes doing their quiet comprehensive assessment of everything in the room simultaneously. The two Kogarashi clerks who had processed the sealing material transactions were present, having traveled from the branch office overnight, sitting with the composed stillness of people who were in a formal setting and would be exactly as useful as required and no more. Hamura and Koharu were at the table's opposite side from Kakashi, which had the accidental quality of appearing deliberate, the geographic separation of people who understood that the geometry of a room was a form of statement. Hamura looked like a man who had been awake for most of the night. Koharu looked like a woman who had been awake for most of the night but was better at not showing it. Danzo was not present. Naruto took the seat at the table's center, across from Hiruzen, which was the designated position for the subject of the proceedings. He was in his standard gear, not dressed up, not dressed down. Clean jacket. Headband on. The silver moonborn traces faintly present at his collar and wrists, visible to anyone looking for them and not hidden from anyone who wasn't. The moment he sat down, Hamura's eyes went to the silver light and stayed there. Griv opened the proceedings without ceremony. He stood, opened his document folder, and said, "This is a formal Kogarashi Asset Integrity hearing under Statute 7741 UZ. The subject is Uzumaki Naruto, documented victim of systematic unauthorized suppression of primary chakra pathways and registered bloodline abilities. The documented responsible party is Shimura Danzo, Senior Konoha Council Advisor, with complicit administrative action by council members Mitokado Hamura and Yudatane Koharu." He sat down. "I will now present the evidence." He presented it for 40 minutes without stopping. Every document read aloud. Every timeline stated with precise dates. Every sealing technique cross-referenced against Danzo's known signature in the Konoha archive. The financial records. The material procurement. The access logs that showed 3 separate individuals, Danzo, and 2 root operatives now deceased, had interacted with Naruto's chakra system at the date specified. The 4 additional instances after the initial sealing, including, this was the one that made Kakashi's visible eye go dangerously quiet, the most recent, placed while Naruto was 12 years old and enrolled as an active genin under Kakashi's direct supervision. Naruto sat through all 40 minutes with his hands flat on the table and his face calm and watched the evidence of his own stolen years laid out in sequence, and did not look at Hamura or Koharu except once, near the end, when Griv read aloud the section about the moonborn bloodline specifically, the deliberate, targeted suppression of an entire biological inheritance, the intentional severing of a child from his own mother's legacy. He looked at them then. Not with anger, with something colder and more permanent than anger. With the clear-eyed recognition of what a person had to decide to be in order to do what had been done. Koharu met his gaze for about 3 seconds and looked away. Hamura didn't look at him at all. When Griv finished, Hiruzen spoke. His voice was controlled, the voice of the Sandaime Hokage, not the old man who had made mistakes, but the one who knew how to carry the weight of authority without flinching from it. The evidence as presented is accepted into formal record. The Kogarashi documentation is recognized under the Intervillage Financial Accords and carries full legal weight. He looked at Hamura and Koharu. "I would like to hear from the council members present." Hamura straightened. He had the look of a man who had been building to a defense all morning and was deploying it with the professional composure of someone who'd spent 40 years in Konoha's political chambers. The actions taken were authorized under emergency security provisions applicable to Jinchuriki management. They were not authorized, Hiruzen said quietly. Hamura stopped. "I was explicitly consulted on this matter in the year following Naruto's birth. I instructed Danzo that no action was to be taken without my authorization. No authorization was given. Not for the initial sealing, not for any subsequent addition." Hiruzen's voice remained controlled but something underneath it was not. "What was done without the knowledge or sanction of the Hokage's office. That is not emergency provision. That is unauthorized action by advisory personnel, sustained over 12 years. Koharu spoke for the first time. "We believed the risk was, you believed," Hiruzen said, "that your assessment of the risk superseded my authority as Hokage. You were wrong. And you said nothing. For 12 years, every time you saw that boy in this village, every time you saw him train and struggle and fall short of potential that was being systematically stolen from him, you said nothing. His hands were flat on the table. That is not security management. That is something else. The room was very quiet. Naruto had not taken his eyes off the Hokage. He'd expected anger from Hiruzen, had expected the formal controlled version of it, the institutional management of it. He hadn't expected this. The old man's voice carried something that was past politics, past administration. Something that was simply grief. The grief of someone who had failed to protect a child in their care and was looking at that failure from the wrong side of 12 years. Koharu and Hamura were stripped to silence. Danzo, Naruto said. His voice was even. The room looked at him. He wasn't here this morning. Danzo has been made aware of the hearing, Hiruzen said carefully. He moved at dawn yesterday, Naruto said. I intercepted him in the eastern training grounds with 4 root operatives. He's in the lower administrative district, I can tell you the building. He looked at Griv. Can that be added to the record? Yes, Griv said, and wrote it. Hamura's eyes were sharp on Naruto. You confronted Danzo alone. He came to me, Naruto said. And yes, alone. He had 4 operatives and I went alone. He held Hamura's gaze without particular animosity. I wanted him to understand who he was dealing with before this hearing. It seemed fair to give him that. Something shifted in Hamura's expression, something he didn't quite manage to contain before it showed, something in the vicinity of involuntary reassessment. He'd been present in the early sessions when the original seals were placed, when a baby had been presented as a threat requiring suppression. He was looking now at what that baby had become even under suppression, and he was doing math. Naruto let him do it. The disposition question, Griv said, standing again. He addressed Hiruzen. The Kogarashi requires a formal response to the violations documented in this file. Under the inter-village accords, the options are judicial prosecution of the responsible parties, formal asset restitution, which in this case would take the form of public acknowledgement and official record correction, or a combination of both. He paused. We have a preference. Hiruzen looked at Naruto. Naruto. This is your proceeding. What do you want? Naruto had thought about this. He'd been thinking about it since the first night in the assessment room in Tsukino, since Griv had laid it all out and Naruto had sat with the number circled twice in the ledger. He'd thought about it on his windowsill in the rain, in the moonlit clearing when the last seals came off, in the conversation with Danzo in the training grounds. He'd thought about what his mother would want, and what his father would want, and what 12-year-old Naruto who'd been struggling to keep pace with everyone else and making a whole personality out of the refusal to give up deserved. He'd thought about what he actually wanted, distinct from what he was entitled to. I want it on the record, he said. Every part of it. Not buried in administrative files, public record, accessible to anyone who asks. What was done, who did it, when, and what it cost. He looked at Hiruzen. I want Danzo to stand in front of this table and say it out loud. Not read from a prepared statement. Say it. Hiruzen nodded slowly. And I want the Moonborn bloodline formally registered, Naruto continued. In Konoha's official records. Not as a risk designation. As a heritage record. My mother's clan is not a footnote in a security file. He held Hiruzen's gaze. It's mine. It's a name. It goes in the records the right way. Done, Hiruzen said, without hesitation. The judicial prosecution question, Griv said, looking at Naruto. Naruto looked at Hamura and Koharu. They were both looking back at him now, Hamura with the controlled wariness of someone waiting for the sentence, Koharu with something that was possibly the closest she'd been to genuine vulnerability in a long time. Remove them from the council, Naruto said. Both of them. They don't get to have authority over village affairs going forward. He paused. But I'm not asking for imprisonment. They're old. They believed what they believed and they were wrong and they should spend whatever time they have left knowing what the wrong cost. He stood up. That's enough. That's worse than a cell. Hamura looked at him for a long moment. Something in his face moved. Danzo is different, Naruto added. Danzo gets the full judicial process. Whatever that looks like, I'll leave that to the Hokage and the records and the law. But he doesn't walk away from it. Hiruzen nodded again. Agreed. Griv wrote for 30 seconds, paused, wrote again, and closed his folder with a clean precise motion. The Kogarashi is satisfied with these terms, he said. The formal file will be updated to reflect the hearing outcomes and transmitted to the central archive. He looked at Naruto. The matter of your asset restoration is now formally closed. What was taken has been returned. The record reflects the truth. The morning light through the high windows had shifted while they'd been talking. It was full morning now, bright and direct, falling in columns across the stone floor and the long table with its 8 people and 1 document folder that had changed the shape of something irreversibly. Naruto pushed back his chair and stood. The silver moonborn light at his wrists caught the morning sun and held it for a moment, warm and certain. Kakashi was watching him from his seat beside the Hokage. The careful distance was completely gone. His visible eye held something Naruto had learned to recognize over the past 4 days, the look of someone recalibrating not their assessment of a person but their understanding of what a person could be. Naruto gave him a small nod. Kakashi's eye curved. He found Sasuke on the roof of the administrative building afterward, which was either surveillance or the most Sasuke version of attendance at a significant event possible. He was sitting at the roof's edge with his elbows on his knees, looking at the village spreading out below, and he'd clearly been there long enough to know what had happened because the set of his jaw had the quality it got when he'd processed something and arrived at a position. How did it go? Sasuke asked. The way it needed to, Naruto said, sitting beside him. Sasuke was quiet for a moment. Below them, Konoha was entirely itself, market sounds, training ground noise, the general aliveness of a village operating on a normal morning. Completely unaware that something fundamental had just been formally corrected in a room above its head. The record correction, Sasuke said. Public access. Yeah. People are going to see it. That's the point. Sasuke's jaw moved. He looked at the village for a moment, then at Naruto. When I first read you as a competitor, at the academy, I looked at your results and thought you were below my level but interesting. That there was something inconsistent in you that I couldn't map. He paused. I thought it was your nature. Unpredictable, inconsistent, full of potential that never quite translated. And now, Naruto said. Sasuke turned to look at him directly, the full weight of Uchiha focus, Sharingan sharp even without the Sharingan active, the gaze of someone who looked at things completely because looking away from anything felt like defeat. Now I know what I was actually measuring, he said. And I think, a pause, the kind that cost Sasuke something, I think even under suppression, you were keeping pace. Not falling behind. Keeping pace. I know, Naruto said. That's, Sasuke stopped. His jaw was set. That makes you considerably more interesting to me than you already were. Coming from Sasuke, in the specific tone he said it, this was essentially a declaration. Naruto had learned to read Sasuke's emotional vocabulary and he knew what considerably more interesting meant in Sasuke's language. It meant I see you. I intend to keep seeing you. Don't get comfortable because I'm coming. Good, Naruto said. Because I intend to be extremely interesting going forward. Something that was almost a smile crossed Sasuke's face. Not quite, but close. The version of it he kept for things that got through. They sat on the roof in the morning light and looked at the village. Somewhere below, Danzo was in the lower administrative district, and the judicial machinery was beginning to turn, and Hamura and Koharu were sitting in the council chamber with their authority removed and nothing but the remaining years of their lives to sit with what they'd done. And Griv was in his temporary office adding to the permanent file in 17 locations. And the Moonborn bloodline was in the official Konoha record for the first time, attached to the right name, in the right column, without a security designation. And Naruto was sitting on a roof in the sunshine with the silver traces at his wrists catching light, all 100 stones gone, every door open. Tomorrow, Sasuke said. Yeah, Naruto said. Train with me. Obviously, Naruto said.